I guess I'm kind of rambling on a few points here, but dude, it's just was in my blood.
Like, I mean, I've knocked the milk off a button buck's lip more times than I can count.
Oh yeah.
It's,
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours, but the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and I mean, with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, I mean, what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back.
Heyo.
Our podcast, episode 140.
As always, remember to like, follow, subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen.
Nick is still here with us.
Hey, I haven't messed that up yet.
I know. He's been practicing.
That's good.
In the mirror at night.
I literally haven't ever. Yeah, I've never practiced once. But.
Nick, welcome back again.
Thank you.
Still looking
still tan.
Yeah,
not any less tan than this morning.
Yeah. I was gonna say it was like 30 minutes ago. We commented on it. Yeah. It is August 3rd.
Yeah.
You're listening to this, it's, I don't know, mid-August at this point. I might be at the beach. Maybe I'm looking like Nick at this point.
Yeah.
Probably not. I'm just burnt and drunk.
That's how it started.
Yeah. You peel that layer off, peel that layer off, and then you're good after that.
Yeah.
I forgot to bring it up on the last one. How bad are your legs?
In terms of?
Chiggers.
Oh, pretty bad.
Dude, I was about to get a Scotch Brite pad last night. I just scratch my legs off.
I'm actually still dealing with the Magnum PI. I've got because I wore the hiker boots, and I'm pretty sure just leaves of poison ivy kind of just rolled and wrapped around my ankles, and so it looks like I had my ankles in some sort of cuffs, but it's just all poison ivy.
Okay,
I've got a little bit on the arms and stuff. That was my bubbly whatever we touched in Illinois, which Dawn told us don't touch that when we did.
Dude, look at mine. Mine burnt off.
Yeah, that looks. That's like flesh eating.
Yeah. Yeah, it was eating away at me pretty good.
There's some plant that it's like poison ivy, but
it might die.
But it's not. And but when you touch it, it fills with fluid under your skin.
This was that was my pus bubble there.
Dude, that's insane.
Jared's a picker too. He can't leave it, so it's just gonna scar up.
Been anxious.
So I'm recovering, I'm itchy.
No chiggers on the legs though?
Oh yeah, for sure. Maybe one in a place I didn't want one either.
Ooh.
Couple.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, is that? I'm just hoping that's just a random itch, and then it's still there. I don't think it's crabs.
My TBD. My Illinois crabs. My confidence and my resiliency to poison ivy is ever climbing. I've been of the opinion that I'm not really allergic, but I don't think I got any from this past trip.
Yeah, I've got. I see it right there.
I was like, is that poison ivy? He's like, I think that's Virginia creeper. I was like, sure.
5 leaves.
I don't know if I've ever, maybe once when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
I usually get one bad batch a year, and then, I don't know, I build immunity or something. Then after that, it's not bad. But yeah, I was still recovering. The chiggers were real bad, which was funny because I felt like for a couple of days after, we must have got them in Kansas. Because I don't think Illinois was...
Could be. I didn't get them till 2 days ago.
Yeah, and then it was whoa, where did all this come from?
Out of nowhere, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what'll happen when you're in the heat of it.
Thick of it.
Yeah, so anyways, this kind of tied in, but not tied into some of our past podcasts here. We've got Aaron Warbritton, Warb, on from the Hunting Public today. And so we've kind of talked to Warb a little bit about some of the podcasts we've had in the past, including Matt Ranella, and some of the things that Matt kind of made assumptions on, and not just in general towards the hunting public, but overall from an access standpoint, from a public system, from a draw system. Obviously Warb and those guys they're living in the heart of it at this point. And, a guy like Matt might throw some blame at him. Obviously we talked to Warb and those two have never discussed anything. They've never met or talked about it. So it's a lot of the assumptions. Well, those guys are doing this, so obviously it led to why there's, less turkeys here, or there's more people hunting here, or more applications for tags here. So it'll be interesting to get Warb's end of that, because he obviously knows what they do. And I know that he works closely with a lot of states and a lot of habitat organizations to, kind of see where these trends are going and what are some of those causes. And, clearly we talk pre-podcast, like it's not just them.
Well, yeah. And just for some context on like our like you and I have been pretty open, and like even as we're figuring out our place in this public-private land debate, not that there's you have to be on one side or the other, right? It's an ever fluid thing here from state to state or even within states, but like be interesting to hear Aaron's perspective on like with any like movement or like anything that you pursue, like there's gonna be like consequences, positive and negative. And so like undoubtedly, like these guys are seeing probably the same trends that we've been discussing, which is like in some cases increases of hunters and what that might be attributed to, and like what role, how that's changed, if at all, their position or perspective on that situation. And like I assume it's ever evolving, just like our opinion on it is, like how those guys need to be finding themselves in this public land landscape.
Well, and we've had Warb on before, but I'm glad we're kind of at this point in the time frame of the podcast to have this discussion, because obviously here we are, a few years post COVID boom, right? And so to understand,
settling back into like real numbers.
Yeah. So like what happened into COVID into now coming down out of the COVID boom, essentially, of the hunting side of it. And we've talked about this before. I mean, it should come to no surprise. I'm not saying that numbers are low, because we're going to get into that, but it should come to no surprise for people that like that false high of COVID is not going to continue. Like it's not there. Like people eventually went back to real life, essentially. And so to be able to hear it, on Warb's side and kind of that firsthand experience of what they're seeing in these different states as they travel around, I think will be pretty cool. So let's bring him in. It's nice to have Nick here, that we don't have to like go around the table and like
just
pause
nice
this
to look
stuff.
at.
Yeah, it's great.
Just gives me peace in my soul.
Yeah.
What up, dudes?
Oh man, look, that is crisp, clear.
It's the best sounding guest we've
man.
ever had. Yeah,
That is an Amazon special, boys.
That's what you like,
$89.99 right there.
That'll do it.
Just
Dude.
got it.
That'll do it. You're
So
just
this is the maiden voyage for this new microphone setup.
like
Hopefully
Rogan
it
up in
sounds
that
good
joint.
Hopefully it sounds
great.
good, Nick.
Yeah, no, you sound great, dude.
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
We'll do it live.
It sounds good, but I'm sitting here itching just listening to y'all talk.
We're gonna just keep talking and not
Yeah.
take you off mute here.
Well, yeah. Obviously, as a dedicated, guy of the Midwest, you've had your fair share of chicker run-ins.
Oh, dude, it's just part of life at this point.
Is there anything you can
part.
do?
I don't know, man. I've heard all kinds of weird stuff.
Jared
and I don't know.
squeezes them out. I don't know if that's really what you're supposed to do or not. Like I'm
get
talking
'em
like
out.
forceful squeezing them out.
I get them.
I heard you scratch them until you open them up, and then you pour like bleach in them or something, and then
I don't think that's gonna
I've
be
seen,
good.
Yeah,
I've
that's
seen
the
guys
wrong
that
president.
did that, and then they just end up with these ugly scabs all over the place. It's like I don't know, man. They're just not
I'll just
fun.
ingest the bleach and hope that takes care of it.
We'll have to figure out, Warb. I don't know what it was, the plant. It kind of looks like
at
a Queen Anne's lace type of annual plant, but I don't know if it's like a poison. I don't think it's poison hemlock or something. I mean, I don't know. But like, yeah, don't touch it because it's not good.
I do agree with what Jared was saying though about like if you've gotten poison ivy a few times in your life, sometimes you don't get as bad of a reaction to it as you get older. It seems like the more I'm around it, the less it's a problem.
I wonder whose side of the conversation Ward would be on from earlier.
What's that? Oh, from our earlier
The
conversation?
nature versus.
We'll get into it. I'm sure we'll get into it. Well, cool, man. Listen, we appreciate you taking time out of the editing day. It sounds like to jump on and enjoy. Isn't it crazy, dude? It's August 3rd right now.
Yeah, man, summer's flying by. Got to fish with the boys last weekend, and that's what I really enjoy most about summers is just getting to take them fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But it just goes by way too fast. It's like I wish it wasn't. I wish I could back up a month or so and kind of do that portion over again, because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Just getting to kind of take eyes off of a computer screen for a little bit. But now we're getting closer to September, and I'm on here, like I told you guys pre-podcast, I'll be on here till late tonight, and then again tomorrow. I'm trying to help Greg finish some interviews for a really cool video that we're going to drop at the first of next week. It's going to be, I think it's going to be called 5 Ways to Be a Jerk on Public Land.
Ooh.
We like filmed a bunch of these skits, like basically just showing what a total jerk looks like on public land. And I think it's going to be really funny, but we're putting a lot of effort into it. We're showing sort of the funny, the satirical side. And then we're also talking about, how to be ethical on public land to other hunters and how to treat people right and stuff like that. So
isn't it funny, man? I mean, it's it all kind of comes back to this whole limited resource thing, which we beat to death. But when you get into some of these places, Corey, who was on our last podcast, was with us in Southern Illinois a couple of years ago, and like we sent him into this spot, and we kind of had already mapped it out and set up a stand, and like, I don't know, he's like 100 yards in, and basically some dude's like F-bombing him and flashing him with his light and stuff. And it's like, what do you expect him to do? Like, he's not going to set up right next to you. He's walking by you, but like, you can't be the gatekeeper to the entire public land. And it's your fault you're set up 100 yards from the parking lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's always folks like that. But to be honest, I'd say we have had a few of those run-ins over the years, and they're never pleasant. But I'd say 95% of our interactions with people are positive.
Yeah. I was going to ask you.
It just takes that one guy, though, to kind of ruin your season even, or ruin you from going back into that spot. Like there's been some occasions, like I was talking with Eric Chesser recently from Hush, and he got ran off of public land like multiple times in this one little spot. He was just glassing from this little corner. He was glassing across a piece of private onto some public that he had to access from the other way. But it was public land, and he was sitting there, and he was not going to go onto the private and trespass. Obviously, he was just watching game through a spotting scope, and this guy harassed him to the point that he had to call the warden and everything.
Remember, I got chased off in Kansas that way when you were hunting on Marcus's place, and I was watching those bucks in that field. I was sitting there with my just glassing from a public road, like just glassing. Wasn't going on anyway. And this guy came up next to me, and he basically, in no better words, told me to get out of there and followed me the whole way out.
What was my question to you is like, what? Because it would take a fair amount of harassment. You'd have to wave a gun in my face to, like, it's a public road. Like, you can sit wherever you want.
Yeah, it's just that. When are you going to take the high road on it and just be like, it's not worth my time? And listen, in today's society, people are freaking nuts as well. So
we've had cops come and run us off of because they didn't want us slugging a deer.
We were already pulled off the side of the road.
He's like, you're parked on my curb. I was like, it's not your curb, but all right.
Yeah,
I usually just walk away. I mean,
we did
that, like I said, that's only happened a couple of times ever to me, but the few times that it has happened, I just am like, nah, it ain't worth it.
It's not.
I'm gonna go somewhere else. I mean, I'm looking at a pretty big area here with lots of different access points. It's not worth it. Sure. Now I at least know where you're gonna be, and this spot means a lot to you, so I'll just kind of avoid this area for now. Although, like to Jared's point, that's not right for them to do that.
Sure.
I just, I'd rather not stress out over a confrontation and just avoid it.
The non-resident thing is I think a lot of the opportunity there. Like, for instance, that was in Illinois when the police, like, if we were a resident, I'm sure we wouldn't have got near as much shit for it.
Well, it does. It happens everywhere. I mean, it's funny to hear, Aaron, as much as you guys are exposed to, the public lands in period. That happened to us in the Dakotas too, right? There was that outfitter that was running guys off of
we had to walk in because it was a walk-in. It was part of the plots program.
That happens a lot, dude. I think on those more nomadic species, like the outfitters or whoever, the local, they know where they're at.
He drove the fence line as people were walking up the fence line on the public side. He just drove right next to them to make sure there was no way.
I was like, what are you gonna do? Like, you run me off the road, or it's like I'm just gonna sit here?
Yeah,
I don't know.
People, it comes back to people really, and this is kind of what we're going to talk about a lot today.
Time, man. Think about like the old Indian tribes. They used to probably the war over, the buffalo, like moving through an area and stuff. It's a primal thing.
Yeah.
It is. It's just like back then they had to eat to survive.
Yeah.
And now, like, that's why I kind of throw my hands up when some of that stuff happens. Is like, at the end of the day, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
Is it really worth it to try to just keep such a tight grip on this thing from other people? Like you're saying, Jared, in an outfitter's case, they may have elk that are, they're summering on the public land and wintering on their property, and they're trying to keep as many people out of that public land as possible so that they can guide clients or whatever on their property. And I shouldn't say outfitters in general, because they're not all like that. There's lots of really good ones. It just, a few bad apples like that here and there, you definitely hear about.
Yep.
But even then, it's like, man, are you starving to death? It's going to be all right. I just have always had better luck having a discussion with people. It's like, if there's a guy, I ran into a guy from Michigan. I was hunting in Iowa, and obviously I've spent a lot of time there hunting over the years, and I was going in for a gun hunt early in the morning. I knew the spot I was going to. I got in there way before daylight, and I was slipping into this bedding area. I was probably 50 yards from the spot I wanted to set up, and I saw a light coming in behind me, and there's only one access path in there. So I knew it was another hunter coming right in the same way that I just did. So he saw my truck parked there. He still got out. He walked in directly behind me, and he walked right up to me, and I was like, well, where you headed?
He said, where are we going?
He pointed right to that bedding area that I was going to. He's like, I got a stand back here. It's been up for 8 months, and I've been wanting to hunt it on opening day, so I'm going to sit right there. I'm like, right there's where I was planning on going, right on the transition of the bedding area. And he just kind of looked at me, and he didn't say anything for a while. And I'm like, where are you from? Your accent sounds a little different. And he's like, I'm from Michigan. And I said, so you wait a couple years to get this tag? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, probably cost a good amount of money. And he said, yeah. And I said, just go back there. I'm like, I hunt here a lot. I know all this public land pretty well. Like, I've got 5 other options, even on opening day of gun season, where I can go. So I just said, just go back there. And I walked out of there, and I just moved to a different spot. Ended up killing a buck.
Yeah. And that's the high road side of things.
You take that time to inform them that you're not supposed to leave stands on public land for 8 months?
Yeah, I mean, I did mention that. I was like, well, you're technically not supposed to have that thing up all summer. You're supposed to put it up, 7 days before the season or during the season.
Yeah. He's like, it's made out of 2x4s. What do you want me to do?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he was pretty cool after that. Obviously, he's like, man, I really appreciate you doing that. I drove all the way down here yesterday, and I've been excited about getting in there. It's like, yeah, go ahead. Dude, I got other places I can go.
It never ceases to amaze me, like, how people come out of the woodwork. Like we've experienced in Kansas recently, these places that are like so remote, and you're like, I'm in it, dude. Like, this is, Big Buck Central. Like, we're really putting an effort to be back here. And then, wouldn't you know it, like, that week rolls around, and it's like, so-and-so found a way to forge the river right here. So-and-so's private land backs up, and it's like this, we can recount it for you at some point. But I have a spot like that in Kansas. It's not like I have a spot, but there's this spot in Kansas that historically has been very good. We found big sheds there. I've missed some big deer there. One big deer in particular. Mm-hmm. And this last year we went back to hunt it, and I know for sure one thing had changed, but I don't know if that's what I contribute all of this to or not, but I had guys walk under me the first 4 hunts. I mean, literally.
And it's back there. It's in there quite a
time
ways.
After time after time. Sometimes 2 guys in one hunt, and I'm like, what happened? Like, I had never seen anybody
Early
back
November?
here before. Third week.
Third week November.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Third week, which a lot of guys, are kind of privy to. It's like, you can be a little bit further north that second week in November, and Kansas is like a third week. People know that.
The big factor there is they ended up clearing a little bit of a path along the private property fence for cattle maintenance.
I think they were just maintaining the fence.
And then, I mean,
all of a sudden
made
opened
it easy
wide
for people to get back there.
I couldn't believe it, but it was just like.
Was there a really big deer in there?
I didn't know. Well, yes, there was.
We did.
There was one that I thought, we had pictures of from like earlier on in the year, I guess. But
probably was a.
See,
they didn't know
that's
that
what
though.
we've
I can almost
noticed,
guarantee
man,
it.
is like doing this for a while now. If we show a really, really big one, the floodgates open immediately.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's a lot of times it's local folks that know the area. That's the biggest thing with us is like we don't film landmarks if we can avoid it. We
Right.
don't talk about specific areas or anything like that. I mean, we might mention the state that we're in, but most of the time we go to great lengths. I mean, any maps that you see on our videos, they're not actual maps of the area.
Mm-hmm.
They're example maps that we pulled from somewhere else just to illustrate the point. Because we want to be respectful to the residents that hunt there. Like, we're not trying to hotspot a particular property.
Right. Which is what you get accused of, Warb. I mean, for a
we
lot of
do.
people,
And
I mean, they're calling you, they're saying, these guys are spot burning.
We don't do that. That's false. Like, I saw some post on a forum one time that had our logo on the sign of some national forest. It's like, we've never filmed that sign one time. And in fact, we've made a point not to.
Yeah.
We don't. And granted, we put out a lot of content. I'm sure mistakes have been made over time where we've, missed something. That's going to happen every once in a while. But I mean, we go to great lengths not to show the specific spots. But what I have noticed is if locals hunt there, or not even a local, if a non-resident or a local hunts there, and they know the intricacies of the area, they've already been there.
Yeah, they
and
know
like
it.
set foot on the area. They can see where you've been.
That's what it is.
But those aren't the ones I'm necessarily concerned about.
No, they were already there.
Those people, they've already been there.
Yeah.
I just don't want somebody that's 5 states away to be able to just immediately know exactly where we're at and then show up there.
Well,
but
the world is
what
just
I
getting
have
smaller.
noticed with the big deer thing, though, man, is like, if we've shown a really big one, or there's a big one that's in the area and people know about him and he's living on public land, people come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
I hunted a deer that was like 190s or something in Iowa a few years ago, and filmed a video or two about it. Didn't show any landmarks, nothing like that. And the place had maybe, 1 or 2 hunters on it that I'd seen all season. All of a sudden, there was like 10 or 15 new hunters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just in a matter of a week. And they were all running cameras in the same draw, and they all had stands around this same draw. So it was like,
Wow.
I mean, from that point on, we just kind of like, we're not going to chase this specific.
It's the Chris B effect.
Here.
Well, dude, people are so effective nowadays. Like, it's funny, somebody can point to you guys or Eric Chess or whoever and say, well, you guys are promoting public land and it's creating an increase in pressure. The reality is, and I'll assimilate it like to our conversation about like baiting and the effect that has. It's not just that one thing. It's the fact that, like, in your case, it's paired with tools like Onyx and like, things that's like, even right here, our ability to figure out where something is at, or like use this deductive reasoning, is so much better than it ever has been. Paired with a promotion of public land, it's like, no matter how careful you are about the promotion of something, it's like, if somebody's driven, like we'll find a way.
Figure it out. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is the access problem.
It is.
And that's really existed for the last couple decades. And we've all experienced it. And I used to think, in the late 90s and early 2000s growing up, I was like, well, this is only happening in our area of Missouri. All of a sudden we're getting all these people coming up from St. Louis or, Kansas City or the cities, any city in Missouri, and they're buying up land up here. They're leasing up land. And like, this wasn't happening a few years ago. And it just started to transpire in that early 2000s time frame when pretty much all the local folks in the area, you could go down the road and buck square bales for a farmer and you could get access, and 3 or 4 of your buddies also had access to the same farm.
Yep.
And you just kind of shared that. But then, it snowballed from there. Leasing became a thing, and then sort of trophy deer and growing trophy deer, bigger antlers became a thing, scoring deer, then aging deer. And you guys know, like, when it comes to making a big buck, you need a lack of human pressure.
Yep.
You need people to not be there. I mean, you need to remove as much of that out of the equation as possible and essentially give those deer a sanctuary to live. And the bigger that sanctuary gets, the less access you have. So I'm not saying at the time I was really pissed off about that when I was younger. I mean, heck, I used to hunt quietly a lot when I was younger because I saw this happening and it all got leased and bought anyway. So I decided after that point, I'm like, well, I'm just going to be proactive about this. And, you know, that's the reality that we faced. Well, we get accused of hunting public land because, you know, it's cool or we're trying to be cool or make money or whatever. It's like we didn't start hunting public land because of that reason. We started hunting public land because we didn't have no other place to go. I mean, when I moved to Iowa, I was making sub 20 grand a year. I didn't have enough money to lease or buy property. And it was really, really difficult to find a place to get permission to hunt. I mean, I eventually found a place 2.5 hours from where we were at. But it just became public land just was that was what was available.
Right.
So we ended up out there. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat. I mean, you still have the ability to get permission now, but it is way more difficult than it used to be. And that all is consistently, and like you just said, it's not just that one thing. It's not just trophy deer.
Yeah.
It's the globalization of farming practices, you know, the urbanization of rural communities, essentially. Like all rural communities across the country are shrinking. And people are having to move to bigger cities where the money is just to make a living. So as that happens and transpires more and more across the board and more habitat gets destroyed around these urban areas, I mean, there just is like so many factors involved in the lack of access for people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, I mean, that's really why we started this in the first place, was like, look, people are in the same boat as us. There's actually a lot of people in the same boat as us.
Yeah.
And nobody's relating to them. Nobody's communicating to them or creating content for them. I mean, that's why it worked. I mean, we didn't know it was going to, but that's what we learned real quick is like, holy crap, there's a lot of people like this that are just the general public that hunt.
Yeah. I think one of the big things too is, to your point, Warb, going back in those late 90s, early 2000s, is most states, especially these destination states in the Midwest and stuff, everybody was heading that way, right? COVID just threw the rocket ship through the ceiling, basically. Is like we had this steady kind of increase of like, we're heading towards like lack of access and there's going to be issues. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and it reared its head like right there in front of us that fast. Because all of these people who normally, you know, dabbled or spent a little time here and a little time there, that's the only thing they could do was get outside.
You had two things going on. You had all these new people that had time to get into it.
Yep.
You know, and they have to stay inside or go outdoors.
Yep.
So why would somebody sit in a city in their apartment where they can't go outside and do anything when they could go? I mean, that's why you saw, you know, RV sales go through the roof and canoeing and kayaking spike and national park usage. You saw everything just spike. Anything that had to do with outdoor rec.
Through the roof.
It just went through the roof. But then also you have all these existing hunters that now have 5-10 times the amount of time to go to the woods. Whereas before they might have only hunted turkeys once or twice in a week. Now they can go 5-6 times. And you hear that across the board. And that's how states manage these resources. A lot of times it is the number of licenses sold, but more importantly, it's the amount of time spent in a field. It's like, how many days on average does it take a person to harvest a deer or harvest a turkey? And those number of 100 days just, like you said, went to the moon overnight, and nobody knew what the heck was going on at the time. Like we had no idea that this was even going to happen in this fashion. Nobody did in 2019.
No.
But then it happened, and now we're coming off of it. And starting to get back to normal, although I don't know that we ever will.
I mean, it's interesting to hear that states are really heavily considering that time spent factor, because when we talk about the crossbows, as a part of the archery season. Like that seems like the biggest factor that, like, at least, from us sitting here in this room and not hearing from the States, is like that's overlooked. It's like you still hear about the hunter numbers are way down, are way down, but at the same time, seemingly because of the crossbow and also because of COVID and everything else we're talking about here, it's like
opportunity.
Yeah, but the time spent in the field and the pressure that's put on other hunters and also the wildlife that's there is like seemingly at an all-time high. So how do you combat that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the area that you're in and the time frame that you're hunting. So there definitely is overcrowding in some spots, and in most cases it's during specific time frames, like the first couple days of turkey season on public lands, or like the first week of November.
Yeah.
But if you go to a lot of these areas during different times, you don't see very many people. At least we don't. We haven't seen a tremendous increase. Now, however, across the board, we did see a big increase in 21.
Yeah.
Everywhere we went in 21, we saw more people, more trucks, more hunters.
Yeah.
But since then, it has went back down. And it seems like this last spring was just like 2018. Everywhere we went, 2019. And looking at the numbers, it's about this. That's where it's at again for a lot of states. Not all. Some of them it is. Some of them it's went up and stayed there. Some of them it's went up and then got back flat. Some of them it's went up and then dropped even below the 5-year average that was beforehand, that happened before COVID. So it's really is a case by case basis. But I definitely, like, we avoid areas the first week in November that we think are going to have a lot of hunters, because that's the time. If you go back to that same area first week of October or towards the end of the season, you don't see anybody.
Yeah, nobody's there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
so
wild.
Yes, they are creating more opportunity in the way that the seasons are structured, making, they may have made longer deer seasons, but I don't know if people are necessarily using that. The crossbow thing, though, I could definitely see, more people going to the woods with crossbows during that time frame, and then overcrowding occurring.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the crossbow thing specifically, just speaking in generality, it's like a lot of those people probably at one time were gun hunters, maybe are still gun hunters, and that gun season is restricted or like was most utilized in 1 or 2 days, opening weekend or whatever. And so for all sorts of reasons that I would also get on board with, be able to hunt a rut, be able to hunt more favorable weather conditions and, all the above, just more time in the woods. It's like, well, the crossbow allows me to do that. I can now go hunt that season with a weapon that has a very low barrier to entry. I can just basically pick it up and shoot it. So I understand why that is the case, but I think we're in agreement on what the outcome has been. It's just more people spending more time in the woods.
I think where it caught a lot of these states off guard is, again, nobody could have anticipated what 2020 had in store for us, right? So if you look at states like, I think Kansas started it in 2014, Pennsylvania was 2016 or 17, but opening up crossbows general to anybody. Then all of a sudden you hit that COVID time frame, and it's like, oh, you gave them more opportunity. Now they have even more opportunity. That was
time.
That was
Way
a
more time.
huge thing to try to combat. And there's certain states that did some things. Like I know, I think it was 2020 where Kentucky canceled their non-resident turkey tags. So my non-resident turkey tag in the state of Kentucky during that COVID-20, no good. I couldn't use it. I was out. There was a couple states that I think canceled similar seasons or non-resident tags and some. So
Nebraska, I think.
Nebraska did. Yeah. So they tried to figure it out, but still, that's a hard thing to control. Like once the cat's out of the bag.
No turkey hunting. You're going to spread COVID.
Yeah, I mean
that was the year we went to the Dakotas, right? And that
was
the first year we were like worried that they were going to shut it down,
which was weird because then again, so that was we went out to North Dakota, first time out there, western part for muleys, in fall of COVID, right? I don't think we were there. It wasn't hardly any pressure.
No, not much.
I mean, now given
just kind of that's what we see is it's just like you go into one spot, man, and even on a particular area, you could go into one side of a public area and it's getting smoked.
Yep.
and then you could go around to the other side of
Nothing.
it, and there's one truck there.
Check
or
me
no
out.
trucks there.
Check me out on this, Warb. Not to blow up their, I'm sure there's conversations that have happened around this, but we don't know, like the guys at Onyx or, take, that's probably the most utilized.
But Hun Stand, Spartan Forge, any of them.
Sure.
Oh, there's several of them now.
Whatever they are. Imagine, there probably has to be some sort of, whether it's like live tracking or just where the pins are at or whatever. That company's got to have the ability,
Data.
To, especially if it does have that real time thing. Say, okay, it's allowing for
GPS
tracking. Like you literally over time could map and say, here's a pressure map of the United States.
Yeah, they could.
Yeah.
They could just make all those pins public and just blow every spot up in the whole country.
Yeah.
So you're telling me you've never seen this map before?
I don't know if it. I'm not saying it exists.
Yeah, that definitely could exist.
Yeah. And I mean,
that's what I would do if I was Onyx. I'd be like, hey, we should go. There's nobody hunting us.
That's where this technology advancement has kind of come along, and it has, because it's funny. We talked about it a few weeks ago.
Sorry, guys at Onyx, for blowing that up for
No,
you.
but for sure, there are plenty of people, in the 90s and 2000s who went to Illinois and Iowa and Kansas to hunt from Ohio. Whatever. You didn't hear about
Undetected.
it.
No
Undetected.
social media, no Onyx,
literally
no promotion.
the Matt Ranella hunt quietly. Like it just wasn't there.
Well, they were telling all their buddies at home and stuff about it, but they just didn't have the platform. There's no outlet.
Like Warb, you talked about leases and stuff. It was I was probably in college. I may have even been in Mississippi, like in grad school, before somebody said, "Yeah, I like lease this property." I'm like, "For what?" They're like, "Hunting." I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" Like it was completely foreign in my area. Like nobody leased property in Western Pennsylvania in like the early 2000s even. Like I never heard about it.
I would hear about, but it was like Texas. You'd be like, oh, there's a deer lease. Or like some of the stuff up north, maybe like Michigan stuff. There was old leases.
Yeah. Weird. And then all of a sudden it was like
the deer lease.
Yeah. Became everything.
Yeah, it just started happening. I mean, my dad and uncles and their buddies all went to Illinois like 2 or 3 years in a row in the late 90s. And they just drove around and saw big bucks everywhere and started knocking on doors and got permission to hunt like 3 or 4 places.
Crazy.
And they went over there and had a heyday. They had an awesome time. And then they went to go one more year and knocked on the guy's door. And he's like, sorry, guys, I leased this place up. 2 years later, he sold it. And now you fast forward 10, 15 years later, and there's no opportunity there for them anymore unless they've got quite a bit.
I mean,
of money.
there's not much. I know people say, hey, worst thing they can tell you is no. There isn't much opportunity for knocking anymore. I mean,
there's not.
In many places.
You can get it. If you work hard at it, you can definitely get it. And I still think that there's definitely a place to show people. Like I was talking with Lee Ellis from Seek One about this recently, because he's really good at getting permission. It's like there's definitely a place to educate people on the right way and the wrong way to do this, because nobody, I hate it when I hear a farmer tell me like, well, I don't allow anybody to hunt because I did a few years ago and they came in here and rutted up my crops and
absolutely
shot
Trash.
towards my house. It's like, dang it, man, this one guy ruined this for everybody else. When if they just would have been better about it, then we would still have this opportunity. So I think there still is a place for that, certainly. But to your point, Jeremy, it's nothing like it was when we were kids.
No.
I mean, I could go around and I had access to 700-800 acres of private land when I was 15, 16 years old.
Same.
And it wasn't exclusive access. I shared it with lots of other people, but it was great. I mean, you could just go hunting with your buddies wherever. And now we got access to the 100 acres that my grandpa bought in the early 70s. And everything else has been chunked up and bought into smaller and smaller chunks or leased into smaller and smaller chunks. And that's just the way it is. But it makes me sad to think about, because I mean, the spot where I killed my first deer with a bow, it was, man, my uncle farmed that place for 3 or 4 decades. And they didn't own it. They just rented it for farming, and the landowner let them hunt on it. and I killed my first deer with a bow out of an old wooden ladder stand called Old Faithful that they put up. And this ladder stand was old. It was predated me. I mean, it had been in this tree for 15, 20 years. And I shot a nice little 6-pointer or something out of it, made a good shot, and I watched him go down almost. And it was an awesome experience. And about 8 or 9 years ago, my cousin sent me a picture of that stand on a trailer. They had to go in and take everything off that property because a guy bought it. He bought it and then outfitted it and leased it.
Yeah.
And I don't blame that guy. I mean, I want to, but you can't blame that guy for doing that. It's just, man,
a bummer.
My uncle, he just is a blue collar farmer that has worked his whole life to take care of his family. And there's no way that our family could afford to buy that piece. So whenever it sold, they sent me those pictures, and I mean, I cried like a baby because I was like, this is such a huge part of my childhood hunting.
Yeah.
And their childhood hunting, and now it's
gone.
And we haven't been able to go back onto it since then. And that the more I talk to people across the country, the more common that theme is. So I have personal feelings about that, and I don't like that happened the way that it did. But at the same time, I look at other things that are going on, like just around these cities, and watching draws getting bulldozed and stuff like that is like the one good thing about folks that are buying land to hunt or leasing land to hunt is that most of the time they have wildlife in their best interest.
Yeah.
And they're going to protect what's there. If you sell a piece of land for development and they wipe that that slate clean, you're toast. That's like the worst of the worst as far as I can see it. So I don't know, man. It's just I was mad about it at first, like I said, and I tried to not tell anybody and keep those spots as long as I could, but they all got leased and bought. And after that, I was like, man, things are just going to change. There's no way you're going to stop some of this stuff. Like you said, once the cat's out of the bag, there's no putting it back in.
Yeah.
So all you can really do is adapt. And in my opinion, adapt, support, and advocate the resources that you do have. And like I was telling you, Jeremy, not that long ago, I really wish a lot more states would, get involved with the access stamps.
Oh, yeah,
and
man.
Go that WEHA ground in Kansas and the IHAP stuff in Iowa is really good.
Plots in North Dakota.
Right. The states just don't. They have some restrictions in these areas where they're handcuffed on the amount of money they can spend on that, so they can get outbid by private interests.
Yep.
And it's hard for them to compete for access when they have those restrictions. But if you earmark a stamp in these different places where the funds are directed for that only, maybe we can make a dent there. And I wish in general that if you're a deer hunter and you own a big tract of land, to just try to share it with good people that you know. I mean, as best as you can, even if it's just letting kids come out there and shoot does or something.
Yep.
I mean, then you can kind of spread it around a little bit. But I mean, I've seen it in some areas of Iowa in big swaths of land, like 2,000 acre chunk here, 3,500 here, 800 here, 1,500 here. And you're talking about miles and miles and miles with hundreds and hundreds of deer. 4 people can hunt them.
Yeah.
It's like 30 years ago, there might have been 30 or 40 people that could hunt them.
Right.
Because that was all, that was back in the days of permission.
Yeah.
So,
the state thing is interesting. I'll try not to butcher Pennsylvania's, but so Jared and I sell land here in Pennsylvania. One of the things that we learned probably within recent is the Pennsylvania Game Commission. There is a state law, like a legislative law that it's from like the 1930s, basically, that they can't spend more than $500 an acre on ground. Right? Now, they can use, in of course our area, oil, gas rights produce a lot of money, and they can use that. But there's still a threshold of approval from the state legislature for them to buy land. So if you look at where the real estate market is on land, the Game Commission, it basically has to either get the steal of a century or almost get it donated to them to be able to buy more access. They can't.
All they get is the unwanted stuff.
That's it.
Like the wetland areas or whatever
Absolutely.
that you can't farm, that you can't drill on, or anything that's real cheap. And I don't remember if we talked about this not long ago, Jeremy, or not, but Georgia has that. They recently tried to buy that pine log WMA, which was leased from a private landowner.
Yep.
And they could bid up to appraised value on it, and they could not go over. And they tried doing it multiple times, and they couldn't go over appraised value, so they can't compete in the market.
Jeez. Crazy,
so
man.
Get involved with your state commissions, and find out what's going on wherever you live, because it's different every single place that you go to.
Yeah.
But if you get involved in those commissions, you can at least understand the little intricacies in your own state of what they can and cannot do.
Yeah. There are states doing it right. Like I think at least when I was there, Mississippi had a WMA permit that you bought. I don't know, it was $15 at the time. I don't know what. But even if you were a non-consumptive user, like if I was just going to hike on it or whatever, I still had to buy that WMA permit. That's a huge source of income, especially from the non-consumptive side, which that is one of the struggles we talk about a lot, is like, how do we, the non-consumptive users who use a lot of our public lands, they're not buying a hunting license. We've talked about that in the past, Warb, is like, how do we get them to, on an annual basis, basically help fund these natural resources and access programs, and things like the WMA permit too.
Have you seen Kyle Leibarger's stuff on Instagram Native Habitat Project?
Yep, I have.
He mostly makes shorts and TikTok videos and whatnot. He's got a huge audience of hunters, but he also has a huge audience of non-hunters.
Right.
That totally support native landscapes.
Yes.
And a lot of those non-consumptive users, like you're talking about, like bird watchers or whoever, dog walkers, I don't know. A lot of those people, they really value the environment.
Huge.
So if you could somehow bring them together, which is kind of what BHA did in its infancy, was it sort of bridge that gap between people. But if you could bring those folks together in some way around the habitat side, there's a lot of people that would agree on the restoration of native habitats and the preservation of native habitats for wildlife and wild places.
Yeah. Think of that opportunity though that we missed in COVID. Like, had these programs been set up appropriately when COVID happened, it would have bankrolled some serious access.
Yep.
And it wasn't. In most states, there are some states, I'll give them credit, they probably benefited greatly, but the states that weren't set up for it, there was this mad rush of demand for it, and there was no way to set up to essentially monetize to go to future access and conservation and preservation.
Yeah, and like you said, there are some states to look to follow. And I would agree, Mississippi, they've done a lot of things right.
Yeah, they've got a great department.
On the turkey side too, like Adam Butler, their turkey coordinator, he's a rock star.
Yep.
But I've hunted down there several times the last few years. The turkey hunting is good on public lands. The turkey hunting is good on private lands.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of access.
Lots.
And they've had an increase in resident turkey hunters over the last 10, 15 years, which is something that before the pandemic, a lot of states were seeing decreases in residents, especially youth.
Mm-hmm.
Up where we're at in Iowa, leading up to 2019, they had like 10 years in a row of youth hunter recruitment declines.
Right.
Like every single year it was going down a little bit up until 2019. But Mississippi has somehow reversed that trend, yet they still have good hunting.
Yep.
So like that WMA permit is really something to think about. And I think you've talked about the Missouri sales tax before too.
I have.
Like, dude, oh man, I wish we could get that in every state.
Oh my! I mean, that is the solution. I think. I mean, at least part of it. But I mean, in terms of how do I get money? Right? We're talking like fractions and fractions of a percent on every sales tax that happens in that state. It is a pile and pile of money. I mean, Missouri is probably, if not number one, top 3 wealthiest departments in the country.
Oh, dude, when you look at the pie chart breakdown from what they get from that sales tax,
Yeah.
like over half of their budget is from that sales tax.
Yep.
Where if you go across the border to Iowa, they have no sales tax.
There is no sales
Like
tax.
they basically have a fraction of the budget that Missouri has. And I can take you to a WMA in Iowa that is, 20,000 acres, got like 2 guys working on it. And I know the guys, they work their butts off. They're awesome people making just average, normal folk salaries.
Yep.
And they're out there working their butts off, trying to do as much as they can. But I can take you right across the border to Missouri on some WMAs that are, that are 20% the size of that are like 4,000 acres. And they've got, headquarters and equipment there. They got 4 or 5 people that are dedicated to just that one place.
Yeah.
And the habitat is immaculate. I mean, resources matter as far as money is concerned. And I get it. There's a lot of states that, there's a lot of money sitting behind closed doors that we want to see used for a lot of this stuff that doesn't get used for it. That gets used for other things or whatever, But at the end of the day, if they have more to work with, there is case studies from these states like we're mentioning where you see direct benefit. And that's why I really like the stamp idea, is because when you earmark a stamp for something, they have to use the money for that.
Mm-hmm.
So then you don't get all the politics involved behind the scenes.
Yeah, where's the money
over
go?
The last, $2 million in the budget or whatever, because everybody's got an interest or a department that they're trying to support. So everybody's jockeying for those funds. With the earmark stamp, those funds are, it almost makes it, in my opinion, I would think it would make it easier on the commissions.
You would think so.
Because then they don't have to make decisions on that.
Yeah.
The funds are earmarked for habitat, for example, or for WMAs, or for leased private for public access.
Yep.
Then they just send the funds to that department and they spend them how they're supposed to, and they don't have to deal with all that other back and forth.
Yeah. I know there's been a huge push in a lot of states for hunting and fishing to not just be a privilege, but be put in the state constitution for a right. Very needed, right? I think
it's going on in Oregon right now.
Is it?
Potentially. How for Wildlife just put something up about that recently.
There you go.
Those are awesome guys, by the way. I don't know if you all have had them on.
I don't think we have.
Charles from How he's the dude.
From what?
How
for Wildlife. They're an advocacy group that posts like action items on their page where we share their stuff all the time and we talk about them in our podcast as much as we can. But they're mostly in tune with a lot of the stuff that's going on the West Coast, like in California and Oregon and Washington and stuff. But they occasionally, like I just told Charles the other day about an issue in Texas, and he called me immediately and was like trying to get the lowdown on what was going on, because they want to help. They want to expand that footprint. Yeah. They basically have taken, whenever you advocate for these things, it's a giant pain in the ass.
Absolutely.
Just trying to figure out who to talk to and who to email and all that. They take all the guesswork out of it. They state the issue, and then they put the action item at the bottom. They'll draft an email for you that's just like a placeholder, or you can draft your own. And then you put your name in there, sign your name, and send it out, and it goes directly to the people making the decisions.
That's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
And you can see direct impacts on these issues that they've had their hand in.
Yeah.
So
that's a huge piece. That side of it, the hunting as a right side, but in that same vein, because that's a legislative action, the habitat stamp, right, or access stamp. And man, I can't believe, and I know nobody on this, especially in today's economy, wants to hear about increased taxes, right? But the fact that we're talking about like a fraction of a % of every sales tax that could go to conservation in your state, I don't know who would be against that.
What is it in Missouri? It's like 0.06 or 0.08?
0.08. Yeah, 0.08.
Yeah.
And it generates like $100 million a year.
It's ridiculous, the amount.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And I'm not saying that, if you're in Missouri, you should definitely still talk to your commission and
where's it going?
Make sure
what are we doing?
Yeah, hold them accountable for where those funds are going.
Yeah.
But you just have way more to to use. You got way more things you can do. And there's a night and day difference in, like I said, the WMAs if you go from Iowa to Missouri.
Yeah. And
I'm assuming that's one reason why.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be. So, I mean, that's the stuff that, and I think as hunters, although we want to talk about action items and stuff, we often shy away from the conflicts. And I mean, we had Skip Sly on it. You know Skip, Aaron?
I don't know him particularly well, but some of my buddies know
awesome
him real
guy,
well.
Right? And Skip has really kind of opened our eyes to this whole lobbyist end. And it's like, these guys are doing what? And they're trying to get what passed? And it's, as guys who think we're really in tune with what's happening, we're completely out of the loop of these things until it happens. And then it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean this just happened? Oh, it's been lobbied for 12 months. And it's like,
then you're playing defense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
501c6 organizations, man.
Nuts.
501c6 is essentially a lobbyist organization that can go and they can play golf with the senators and they can fund their campaigns and do all that stuff. 501c3s can't do that.
Wow.
So 501c3s can advocate for stuff, but they can't get in the mud and do the dirty work like the lobbyist organizations can. So a lot of times we end up playing defense instead of going on offense. I've had this discussion a bunch of times with Newberg. It's like,
step behind, man.
Yeah, it's like, do we need to make a 501c6 organization become lobbyists? Like, I don't know anything about that.
It sure
world.
sounds like. I mean, to Skip's point, and this is directly affecting you, Warb, is it was 9 different bills in Iowa, I think, 8 or 9 different bills in Iowa, all of which would have like ruined Iowa deer hunting, like just completely killed it. And it's like, I mean, they had serious money.
17s for turkey hunting on there.
They had what?
They were trying to at one point legalize 17 rifles for turkey hunting, for spring turkey hunting. Like what? I don't know was it West Virginia or Virginia you can hunt them with rifles?
West Virginia.
Out east. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we shared a lot of that stuff out because Corey was sending me updates on it. He's buddies with Skip. So he's got his ear to the ground on all of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, they got a lot of pushback on those, which sounds like we're making some progress. That is the good thing about social media and our platform is whenever we see stuff like that, we can share it out and we can make a difference because we can inform people really
make
quickly.
Some noise.
But we're playing defense, man. I wish there was a way we could be proactive and sort of head that stuff off, because what happens is you play defense, you get a bunch of support for it, and then maybe the legislature pulls it off the table. But all they do is they take it in the back room and they recraft it in a different way.
Take a couple things out
in 2 years later.
Yeah.
So
and I mean that was one thing that, talk about Matt Ranella. Like, Matt wasn't wrong about how those things are, especially from a manufacturing end, and how some of these manufacturers are pushing some things through that frankly are not for the best of the wildlife and from the hunting community. It's just the way he goes about it is, in the next breath, he's saying, well, I wish they would contribute to my campaign to help this. And it's like, well, dude, you can't shit talk them and then come back and say, well, they should give me money for it too.
I think it's really interesting to hear Aaron phrase it like defense versus offense, because that makes me ask the question, like, to myself. It's like, what do we want? Like, as, as hunters, like, if we had the opportunity to play offense, like, what is it that we would be advocating?
Can we all agree on
Can we agree on something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we can all agree on habitat.
Yes, I would agree with that.
What do you think, Jared?
About habitat, or what do we want in general?
Yeah. No, habitat in general, just habitat for wildlife.
Do I think we can agree on that? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think we all want more wildlife habitat.
Yeah, and like I said, the non-consumptive users seem to be on board with that.
Yes.
We can definitely, there's some laws that you can pass to kind of help the age structure or increase the size of the bucks. Like I think the antler point restrictions have been fairly good in most places.
Yep.
Because in the way they structured those is they still allow kids to shoot whatever they want, which I think is important. But then your season hunters have to pass up 1.5-year-old bucks. And in states like Michigan, where there's tons of deer around, or PA, there's plenty of deer. I mean, there's lots of does to shoot. I don't really see much negative things resulting from that. So that was a good one that a lot of states have done.
Yep.
But, going back to the habitat thing, the majority of people are they're gonna support that. I mean, like 25% of people support trophy hunting.
Sure.
The majority of people, you know, just across the board, the general public, period, 75% of them oppose it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find an issue like what we're talking about that you can unite on and make a significant push that direction, the politics will follow.
Right.
If everybody is in step with that.
Yeah.
Just haven't figured out exactly how to, you know, unite everybody on the same page to do that, because we have a lot of division in our communities, our social communities, and within the hunting community. I mean, within the hunting industry, as you guys know, there's lots of bad apples out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good ones too, just like with any industry. But I think overall, most people would get on the habitat
one would be good. I think access is the other one. I don't see anyone.
Yeah, I don't see where people would.
Yeah, non-consumptive would be like, oh, I have more parks to go and bird watch or walk my dogs or whatever. Yeah. Why wouldn't they? I think COVID has opened people's eyes to, we want more green space, right? We don't want to be in the cities. We don't need all this busyness around us. We want more green space, some more natural space. So I think, you know, and that I think is the key. You can't just have the hunters on board. You have to have the constituents of the majority, which is the non-hunters, the non-consumptive users on board to push this through at a legislator, you know, or wherever it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's always going to be, you know, special interests on all sides.
For sure.
That are, I mean, it's hard to satisfy them all. That's why you compete with so many different ones in these governments to get stuff done. But that would be a way. We're looking at that pretty heavily right now in behind the scenes stuff. I don't know if it's going to actually come to fruition. We're going to donate some money of our own to Habitat this next fall and winter. But I'm trying to think of bigger picture ways that we could, you know, touch more people across the country with it than just, you know, what we can do as individuals.
Small side of things in the hunting community, and we'll probably get yelled at for saying it, is Jared and I would like to see certain states not bait anymore.
Sure.
It's hard. It's hard to, like, you know.
Oh man, like you said, dude, everything. Look at this. Look at the antenna on this thing.
I know.
You guys know what this is.
Yeah.
It's like crossbows and cell cameras and bait and TSS shot and, you know, ultra realistic decoys. All that stuff can be fun, but
where's the line?
It's like at some point we have to draw the line. I don't know when it will be, but
some states are doing it. What, Kansas? No cameras, no cell cams on public.
That's where we're at, though. It's like it's hard to pivot from like the conversation that Jeremy and I have a lot, and it comes across as negative. It's not like I want to be having it, but it's like we're trying to protect, you know, what we all have as hunters, which is like whatever the level of access is that we have, the way that it's done. It's hard to even like pivot from that and say, well, let's make more access. Let's do more habitat. Like it just seems like such a big feat when it's like we're struggling hard enough to protect what we have, because it's being, you know, because of all the liberalization of seasons or of the weapons or of cell cameras, you know, stuff that
make it easier
and transparently that we enjoy to a degree. It's like, boy, it just seems like that is more rapidly decaying, the access or the quality of the experience that exists currently. It's like, man, that seems like a fire that needs put out first before we can go on the offense to, you know, improve things at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But I don't know,
man. I like I said, I used to think that way, but then nothing happened. In fact, it kept getting worse. So it was like, you know, do you just try to hold on to what you've got and hope that nobody takes it, or do you go on offense?
Yeah.
Because that's the place I keep finding myself at, is like, man, these battles aren't going away.
Yeah.
They're not getting any better. And the opposition is on offense.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So I don't know how well our defense is going to hold up over the long term. Like I want to see kids having opportunities to hunt in 20 or 30 years.
Yep.
Well,
and if we, you know, that's the biggest thing for me. Like on the recruitment side, I definitely agree. There's overcrowding issues that came from COVID. Some of that stuff is flattening out now. But on the recruitment side, the majority of our viewers are young families. They bring their kids to these shows and they talk to us all the time. And they talk to us about how, thank you for doing what you're doing, because the other option is my kid watching somebody play Fortnite on YouTube. Yeah. And instead we can watch you guys at night and get excited to take him out to the woods this weekend.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews, yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX-5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX-7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and, killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt.
We're talking about all these things that make it easier to kill stuff, and I'm looking at these cell cameras over here like, man, I have such a love-hate relationship with these things.
Oh, dude. I feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world when we talk so much about, I'm firmly against baiting, not from an ethical standpoint, but purely because of how it affects hunting on the landscape level. Like I see it as basically, and this is Ohio where I see this more than anything. So it's a perfect culmination of hunter density coming from, from Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, paired with, the Midwest, I guess. Like there's some big, like my family's property is the perfect example. It's 1,000 acres of what you would think would be, I mean, it's old pasture ground and stuff, but it should be able to be turned into the deer mecca. Okay. And we've done a lot of that work and we've tried to employ those management tactics. And the reality is the distribution of wealth that property should hold because of the work that we've done on it gets immediately distributed in a matter of a week or two around the gun seasons and some of the, later archery seasons and stuff
because of the bait.
And
dude, that's happened in so many places. Like there's a lot of people that don't want to bait that start baiting because their neighbors.
So here's the situation that I'm in and that Jeremy's in.
They feel like
we don't have a choice. And so here I am saying, I hate that baiting exists. I hate this as a thing. And I'm going to go out and buy 5,000 pounds of it so that I can be in the game.
Yep.
And what am I supposed to do? That's the trouble
with it, especially when you're introducing it to places. Like if you look at some place like Texas, they've had baiting down there for eons. And it's just
Ohio
kind of
too.
part
It's
of the
always
culture.
been legal. Always.
Yep. It's kind of been part of the culture down there. So when I go down there and I hunt over bait, it doesn't feel the same way. But if I go to a state like what you're talking about, where it's been adopted and then dropped and then adopted, then dropped or whatever, and the laws are always changing, like there's several states now that have just brought it in recently.
Yep.
It's like that's the boat that a lot of people are in. There's a small percentage of them that are just totally for it. But then everybody else slowly gets on board because they don't have a choice because their neighbors doing it.
Exactly. And in a state like Ohio, it hasn't changed. Baiting has always been legal. What has changed is the technology that we can use around or to take advantage of it. Cell cameras didn't exist, whatever it was, five years ago. Yes. Straight wall cartridge rifles and I don't know if crossbows are recently legal in Ohio, but the technology certainly improved. Box blinds. None of these things are inherently evil, right? They're all, cool things, cool gadgets and stuff.
Together, though.
But, the ultimate culmination, and the one that I like to use as an example is like in Ohio, I can dump a 2,500 pound corn pile and put a cell camera over it, and during the late rut, and sit 100 yards away from it in a box blind with a straight cartridge rifle. And these kids are just mowing down 3- and 4-year-old bucks. And great. I'm all for, but it's not just kids, but they have the earlier season. And it's like, I have a lot of issues with that from the start of, and more to your point, we'll just keep it rolling here. It distributes that wealth. That's like, it's not like I don't want other people to participate, but it's not, it does seem right. It just doesn't seem...
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's like you put yourself in a box blind, and if you have that thing sealed properly with an ozonics or something, you're not going to get smelled. So then you don't have to worry
You
about
will
wind
kill them.
anymore.
And Warp, in my experience, it's been 8 years been hunting this farm. It's 100% of the time. They don't make it through.
Which is what, again, it's a distribution of kind of the wealth or the resource, but it's like you put all of this effort and all this money into 1,000 acres to grow, support, enhance habitat for these deer. They walk off the property under the 5 acres with the big corn pile and then die there.
Yeah.
In most cases, most states, that shouldn't happen.
And it sounds selfish. I understand that it comes across that way. It's not like, and I realize not everybody owns land or has this or that, but like whether it's mine or somebody else's, it just doesn't seem right that like somebody should be able to own a piece of land and whether they're investing into it or not or whatever, but then when the time comes to capitalize on it, I can scoot up next door and just dump a corn pile.
It's the one thing that I think a public land guy and a guy who owns a lot of private land can agree on, because I can't do it on public and I don't want to do it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like there's a certain point that you hit where it's just like, man, this stuff has just gone too far one direction. There's just a little too much gadgetry. I mean, I've been trying to get Miles involved, my oldest stepson, in turkey hunting recently, and he's hooked on it. But I can't tell you how much stress I put on myself before taking him. I was like, I don't want to put him in a blind. I don't want him to use decoys at first. I actually kind of want to set up screwball so that a bird comes in and busts him.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like the perfect scenario because I was raised that way. Like,
yeah,
I'm trying to think back to my childhood. Like I ended up hooked on it and like, I'm in it to win it for turkeys for the rest of my life. And we didn't kill nothing. The first 3 years we went, we got our asses totally kicked. My dad didn't know what he was doing at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great experience.
It's what made you want it.
Exactly. And eventually I got one and he was telling me like, man, I've hunted these things for 10 years and I thought they were unicorns, or whatever. And we finally killed one of them and it was like, holy crap, we did it.
Yeah.
But then I've also taken kids out during those youth hunts and I put them in a blind with a decoy, roosted the birds, went into a perfect spot with a ton of gobblers. Bird flew down in the decoys and he shot him in the first 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Walked out there and kind of looked at it a little bit, thought that was cool. Next year comes around, doesn't want to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't really want to wake up early.
It's
or
too
in a
easy.
few years.
It's that failure that keeps us coming back, man. The suffering. Like we want it.
Yeah.
Right. You want it to be, it's supposed to be a challenge. It's no matter what it is, there's supposed to be some sort of woodsmanship involved. At least that's the way I feel about it.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to cast shade on people that want to do it differently. I mean, my buddy Nick has a lease in Texas and they hunt corn piles all the time because that's the culture that he grew up in.
Yep.
And that it's not like they're some big rich landowner down there. That's in Texas. There's no public land. There's almost none.
Right.
That they can hunt on, and permission is almost impossible to get. So leasing is their option for hunting access, and they got to drive like 6-8 hours from their place just to get to that piece.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing down there. He talks about that all the time. It's like, if we don't bait, our neighbors do. So why are we spending the money on this place to come down here and hunt animals that just want to be on the neighbor's property eating their corn?
Right. Yeah, and it's a dynamic conversation because I think what I was trying to get across to you earlier, like, is in Ohio, it's kind of a perfect storm because in Texas, again, a generalization, but I want to say, and in Kansas, I think this is true also, like the tracts of land generally are bigger.
Yeah, they're giant.
Yeah.
And I don't think that baiting has as big of an impact on the deer herd as it does in a state like Ohio because the average parcel size is so much smaller.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And so it's not just like, okay, yeah, this guy's got 250 acres and this guy's got 250 acres and they each have 2 main corn piles. It's like, okay, here's 340 stacked up against each other and they butt up to 140 behind it and all of them have 2 or 3 corn piles on it. And it's just like, it's kind of madness.
Yeah. And you don't really need it at the end of the day up there. I mean, you don't.
Well, listen, great point. If nobody was baiting, you wouldn't. But because everybody's baiting, you do. You absolutely do.
Oh, exactly. Exactly right. But I think about, like, if you were to take it away tomorrow, or is it going to hurt your hunter numbers? No, I don't think so. I mean, that's just a generalization on my point and just an opinion. So take that for whatever it's worth. But I think just as many people are going to hunt.
What do you think,
They're
Jeremy?
still going to have
Because
positive
you've said
experiences
before
hunting.
you think people will not. It'll decline.
So I think that
They'll struggle. Not as many deer will get killed.
It's going to ebb and flow. I think you'll lose hunters right away because people say it's too hard. I don't have time. It's no offense. It's just, we hear it all the time from a crossbow guy, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It's like, well, why do you shoot? I don't have time to learn and take time and practice and stuff. So it'll be the same thing. It's like, okay, no more corn piles. Well, I don't have time to go out and scout and do all this stuff, and so it'll drop off. But, and this is where I wanted to go before I had to take a leak because I was
like where you're going.
The experience and then the
Quality.
Retention. Yep. Well, I mean, quality of the animal is going to jump.
Quality of the
hunt
experience
is going to.
Is what I'm saying.
And that is going to hold the young kids that we're talking about are going to go right into the loop that we experience, which is, man, you gotta grind a little bit.
Yeah.
You gotta grind a little bit to see some results, and that's going to hook them longer, and your retention is going to be better.
This is exactly like the bass awkwardness that we're talking about from like the recruitment side of it. It's like the recent recruitment efforts have been by the liberalization of the seasons. Here's an easier weapon. Here's, more technology, which in the short term might get people there, but in the long term, the quality of the experience has diminished so much to where we're just shooting deer over corn piles from 100 yards away with straight well cartridge rifles out of box blinds over, you know what I'm saying, is that, that's what it is.
Well, so what we were talking about, and we got this with Brunella, and I think this was a good part of the discussion. One of my things is we've heard it, Warb, on the R3 side, is we've got to recruit because, we're aging and the amount of hunters leaving, right, is greater than we can recruit. I don't know if anybody stopped and thought about the number of hunters leaving isn't just aging hunters as much as it is people who are current hunters who are like, man, this experience is dog shit anymore.
Well, dude,
I don't want to do
this.
The
way to make hunting great again is to make hunting hard again.
Yeah. And so if you're bringing in more people, right, and there's not enough place to put them, the experience for the existing people is going to be worse, and I think they're going to leave. So I think that it's almost the more people you put in, and this is not a reflection of the recruitment from what I would call as the organic trickle, which is I hunt, my kids hunt type of thing. Not that. I'm talking like going outside the box for brand new, I want to be, whatever, field to table, kind of eat sustain, and nothing against that.
Recruiting hunters, new hunters.
New to everything around it is making the experience for existing hunters a little worse, and it's pushing them out. So we're actually putting in a box that, in my opinion, is full, and it's overflowing the people on the back end out.
And here's the cherry on top, though, is I don't think it's just the number. I think it's the way that they're doing it.
Sure. Opportunity.
Yeah. There might be room for everybody that wants to hunt. It's just that if we can all do it over corn piles with crossbows and this and that, maybe not anymore.
Yeah, because the retention on those
there
new
is
people
room
won't
for
be good.
everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not equally distributed across the landscape.
Not at all.
You might have a county with, let's call public and private access by permission the same thing.
Right.
It's basic access.
Yep.
You might have a county that's got 10% of that access and 90% of it is not.
Right.
Well, where do you think 80 or 90% of the hunters are going to end up in that particular county? They're going to go
on the
where
10%. Yeah.
Right. They're not going to go on the other 90.
Right.
If you spread everybody out evenly across the landscape, then we have more than enough.
Yeah, 50-50, you're good. Yeah.
You're right. But we don't have that anymore. And I would agree with you 100% on the gear side of things and making it too easy for people. We hunt public land. I don't know. It doesn't get a whole lot harder than some of these places that we deal with. It's just rough in some of them.
Yep.
But I think the other aspect of that, hunters are definitely aging out. And like I said, we were talking before you left a while ago, Jeremy. My biggest focus is the young families right now that are getting their kids into hunting.
Yep.
Like most of our viewers they're 30-year-old adults that hunt.
Yep.
Or have had some experience hunting before. And now they're trying to get their kids involved in that. And they have to compete with all of these other interests now that we didn't used to have.
Yep.
Like you've got, 4 baseball teams in a year now instead of 1. You've got all these different screens.
Yep.
You've got all this short form content that is attention grabbing they don't know what to do with it. We didn't have that when we were kids. We had some form of that, but it was nothing
close
to the point that it is
Rocks
now.
and sticks.
Yeah, I was playing in the mud.
So those, right, exactly. So those are the people that I deal with the most that watch our stuff. Like that's the core demographic. Is hunting families with young kids that they're trying to get involved. And I think a big part of it is for current hunters, including like guys in our group that have been at this a while, is our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were kids and we grew up in the deer camp culture of the late 90s, I don't remember. I mean, we went to camp and we hammed it up with our buddies and went out to whatever piece of property we had permission on and shot brownings down.
Yeah,
I mean,
agree.
Fork horns and whatever.
Yeah.
And we occasionally somebody would get a big buck and they'd bring it back and be like, "Oh man, you got a nice 8-pointer there," or whatever.
Yep.
Or man, he's wide as his ears, or something.
Agree.
I mean, and now fast forward, you're like, okay, that's a 4.5-year-old buck that I've been watching for 2 years, and he's, got 4-inch bases, and he's 147 and 3/8 or whatever. And it's that's, and I'm not saying there's a right way and a wrong way to look at this. There's not. But I feel like, and guys our age, our expectations have changed a lot from that time frame.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But to your point, when we were kids, you still had to go out there and earn it. You had to work pretty hard.
You were grinding for it.
You were grinding just to get one.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you got one, everybody was happy for you. You took it down to the check station and you got to check out everybody else's deer that they were killing. It was a good social, like the social aspect of hunting was real strong.
Mm-hmm.
But we've kind of strayed away from that in multiple directions that have led to some of these poor experiences that you're talking about. But I do think that it does go back to your own personal expectations about what you want to get. Like we hear this on public land all the time. It's like we'll run into a local guy that's coming out. It's like, man, deer hunting around here ain't worth a darn.
Yeah.
It hadn't been worth a darn for 8 years, or 10 years or whatever. And he's packing up and going home. And then we go in there and kill something.
Yeah.
And it ain't because we're good hunters. I can tell you that firsthand. We're just average hunters. But if we do have one thing in our group, it's optimism.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps us out there in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're listening to this and you're thinking about dropping out of hunting, that ain't, like, you're definitely not going to, that's not going to move the needle for you at all. You're going to take this out of your life and maybe replace it with something else. But at the end of the day, I mean, it just comes down to personal preference. I mean, I got buddies of mine that are extremely pessimistic that won't set foot on public land, and they never will, just because they have this thing in their head that it's like, there's people out there.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with other people. They're going to ruin my hunt. It's going to be awful.
It's trash. Yeah.
It's trash. They've already got that pessimistic view in their mind, and there's nothing I'm going to do to change it. But then I go out there, and if I get one and I show them, they're like, "Oh, well, you just got lucky," or whatever.
Right.
It's like, no, I just didn't I didn't set up those mental barriers in my head going into it.
Mm-hmm. I like the response of like, of our expectation. I think that's really important. Like it just, if somebody is dissatisfied, like with the experience, like you should change that, and you can go kind of one of two or maybe more ways. Like, if we assess for ourselves, like, because we have hunted a fair amount of public land, probably not as much as you have, but we've gone out there, and it's because of lack of access, or whatever. It just, that was the lowest hanging fruit. If we're going to go out of state, we're like, where can we hunt in Kansas? Well, there's public land. Let's try that.
Yep.
And, with mixed experiences. And so ultimately, I think it drove us to, like, we had some bad or whatever, relatively, situations that we wanted to avoid in the future. We're like, well, whatever. We have 1 week to do this. We're getting walked under all the time or whatever. So we can, our options are we go to another piece of public. Like, let's keep bouncing around on options. That's one thing.
Yep.
We can reduce our expectations. We can say, well, and that frequently happens over the course of a week. We go in there, hey, 4-year-olds are bust, and by day 3, 4,
by the end of the week, you're like,
we're like, oh, dude, I'd shoot about anything right now.
Yeah.
Or you hold to your standard and you you try to figure something out.
Get creative.
You buy property. You find you get
You
permission.
lease. Yeah, something.
And so we're like Jeremy and I are like, because we have guys like my uncle is one of them. He's like, he would be on our piece of property in Ohio. He's like, well, just seems like it's almost impossible to grow a deer to 4 or 5 years old. He's like, I would rather reduce my expectations. And I can understand that perspective from he's been hunting a long time and he's older and whatever it is, injuries, life, things play into decisions that you make. I'm young, able, capable. I'm going to do what I can to find a way to shoot big old mature bucks. Like if I have to work harder and sacrifice to buy property or
get access to another piece.
And I sympathize with not everybody has that opportunity. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can and you want to change the situation, like you should.
I think the expectation thing too. We talked about this on the last podcast, Ward, and it's a hard thing to describe. But like, I'm at the point in my life where I would rather just hunt all season and just have just a ball, like just be out in the woods and loving it and not tag a thing than shoot something that would end my season and two would not necessarily meet what I wanted to happen.
But along with that, you want to, it has to be possible. I
want it to be feasible.
You don't want to hunt just to hunt. You want to hunt because it could happen.
I'm chasing a goal. I'm chasing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The thought of it being possible is out there. Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be fun to just hunt Pennsylvania public land day in and day out, holding out for a 200 or bust.
No.
Right?
No.
That's not realistic.
Expectations have to come back into check.
Yeah.
For sure. But could I hunt a mature buck? Yeah, I do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I've done it, but I don't do it often.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay.
Which is that's the right
I'm
mixture.
okay if
That's
I don't fill
there.
the tag, right? Because again, in a weird way, I explained this to somebody, a viewer the last time, is like, I want to just be able to, I love hunting and being out there so much. It's why I hunt so many different states, is if I fill a tag in Pennsylvania, I go to Ohio.
Yeah.
Or I go to Kentucky. Like, if it was just done, I mean, I can't handle that.
I mean, those are expectations that are high on the chart for most people. But like you said, you guys have been at it a while.
Yeah.
You're young, you're able right now. There's nothing wrong with setting goals and going for that.
And it sounds snobby, but it's not because we're just like, oh, like this deer, if it's not a booner, it's nothing. It's not that. It's that we just want to set that goal so high that it pulls us through the season chasing something.
Wow. We're looking for the premium experience, which, like, if you're honest about it, you want a most mature animal with as big of antlers as possible in, like, the best possible hunting. So you want them to come ripping through on November 7th chasing a doe. And it's like, we all dream of that. So we're trying to, like, balance hard, easy access, not, like, all the stuff that we used to get to that point, to, like, make it the best experience, best memory, best outcome possible. And it's...
But to Warb's point, there is a flip side of that, and it's probably from growing up in the deer camp mindset, and we enjoy it for 1 week a year in Kansas, which is our deer camp. And yes, Jared and I want to kill a big mature buck in Kansas, but we have our dads in camp with us. We've been doing it for 2-3 years now, and like at the end of the week, like we always go into it, we're like 4 bucks or bust, man. Like this is the year. We come out with one and like a lot of arrows shot, we leave there with more memories than we probably make the entire rest of the season.
I'll tell you what, too, this is cool. That our expectation, I think, for that trip has kind of changed.
Absolutely
over time.
has.
We used to go to Kansas with like the intention of shooting booners or bust, right? Like that was
and we were okay if we didn't.
And we
shoot
still, hold out hope for that, obviously. And we've passed some great deer and stuff down there. But since the introduction of bringing our dads to that, I think we've digressed there a bit. Like our expectation is more like, how do we give the dads the best experience possible? And like Jeremy and I really get a kick out of that.
Yeah, we're the support team, basically.
Yeah, and that's changed.
Well, these things
really
ebb and flow, like you guys are talking about. I mean, you go from one state to another. You go from one property to another.
Sure.
Like if you're on public land in PA, you're hoping to get a shot at a nice 3-year-old buck in a whole season of hunting with a bow, maybe.
Yes.
Yep.
But if you jump over into Ohio or Kentucky and you're on a big piece of private land, like Jared says, you're holding out for a 4 or 5-year-old buck on a piece of ground where you have more control over. That's the only thing, is that there is such a wide array of expectations at play. Even if you take away all the gear and everything else, there still is going to be people that on public are just over the ridge that are just there for that one gun weekend a year in Brown and Down.
Yep.
They're there for their family deer camp, whatever. Or they're new to bow hunting and they've got one buck down, and any 2-year-old buck that comes through is going to meet their expectations for the year. It's going to make their season.
Yep.
So there's really people at all these different stages. I just think when we reach the pinnacle, like where you guys are at right now of expectations, we have to remember those stages that we came through, because there's other people at those stages right now too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we see that on public land, a lot. It's just running into, especially in Iowa, like during our gun season, party hunting's allowed.
Oh yeah.
So it is a complete circus out there during the first shotgun season. Yeah. But those guys only get together. Like, I know a lot of local folks in the community, they don't even buy a bow tag. Yeah. They just buy a shotgun tag to party hunt with their buddies, and they just mow as many of them as they can and donate them to people and eat the deer and have a deer camp experience. Yeah. And at the same time, I'm looking at it like, man, they're killing a lot of 1 and 2-year-old bucks on this property that, could potentially be 4 or 5 years old in a couple years. But
it's that level
I think
of experience.
that's how, I think our hunting tradition can be preserved in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has existed now for a while with those varying expectations, and it can be done.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about a while ago, not to go back to it, but the gear thing is a little bit different. Like, that's something that has changed
dramatically
a lot over time.
And Warb, to your point, not to interrupt you there, but you talk about your stepson, and I feel it with my kids. We've mentioned it a ton of times. They're growing up in this gear phase, right? This is all they know. Like, all they know is dad looking at his cell cam and being like, damn, that's a great buck in Kentucky, and I'm sitting in Pennsylvania. My worry for them, and almost to the point where you were kind of like engineering this turkey hunt in there for your stepson, is like, I want them to enjoy it. I want them to see deer, but I also want them to earn it. And this is not to disrespect anyone out there, but if I took them out and they shot a 5-year-old 150 on the first sit, they're not gonna stick with it. They just aren't. I can guarantee that they probably 9 out of 10 of those kids will not stick with it long term. It'll just be too easy.
That goes back to that retention thing you're talking about. That's why some of these agencies really struggled when they went to those youth seasons.
Yep.
They went to those youth seasons, some of them 20 years ago.
Yep.
And at first, they still are a good thing. Overall, I think the pros outweigh the cons in most cases. But they went to those, and all of a sudden they're recruiting all these kids that they didn't have. So it's like their youth hunter recruitment is reversed.
Mm-hmm.
But then they realize, like 5 to 10 years into this, like, crap, we're not retaining any of these kids because we're giving them the best weekend to hunt for turkeys.
Yep.
We're giving them the best weekend to hunt for deer.
Yep.
We're removing all of the other factors, like other hunters, from the landscape so they can hunt. We're giving them the best weapon possible.
Yep.
And they're going out there and, even as parents, some people set them up, like you said, to shoot a 5-year-old 150 the first time out.
Yep.
And that happens, and then the kids don't. The kids
Why
didn't have
would
to work
they?
for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's super easy. And I mean, or 5 years later, they end up in the real world, which is there are no special seasons. You're going to have guys all over you, and you're like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I mean, dude, how do you recreate?
Then they drop out.
They drop out. They're gone.
How would you even go about recreating? Like, and it's almost like you wouldn't wish it on people. Like, our upbringing or the way that we like came into hunting, like each of ours, all three of us, I'm sure, is a little bit different, but there's surely going to be a lot of struggle and failure put in there. And also, like, waiting, the fact that, and I was talking with somebody about this the other day. It's like, dude, the time that I probably was the most, I'm still pretty obsessed with hunting, but like when I was like, I was just totally brimming over the top is when I was like 10 and 11 years old.
Right.
Because I couldn't hunt until I was 12 years old, and I was like, I knew I was missing out on something at that point, and I would wake up early, and like I had sat with some duck hunts with my dad and stuff, and I was like, I cannot wait to be able to like participate in this, and like
That's where the mentor program has been good, but I also think it could be abused.
Well, and I don't know. I'm not saying that that's
Absolutely.
right in today's day and age, because there are so many other things, all the screen distractions, the things to pull away. But it's like, it was the waiting and it was the failure. Dude, it took me however many years, 6-7 years to kill a deer with my bow, like successfully. That I think is what instilled the passion that's still burning in me today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you don't want to wish it on anybody, but it's like they have to go through it to get that level of passion from it.
Yeah, I mean, the deer camp thing is what I usually come back to, because deer camp in general it's almost like this heritage thing that you create within your group. And most deer camps have a hierarchy in there of people. They've got kids, they've got folks that are just there to gun hunt for a weekend. Then they also have experienced hunters in it. And when you introduce kids into that, or new people in general, then they get this whole sort of melting pot of perspectives about hunting all in one place.
Right.
And you can sit down and have conversations about it for a lengthy period of time, instead of this isolating yourself away from that.
Yeah.
And that's where that sort of I guess the social aspect of deer hunting, or just hunting in general, was so important to me growing up. I felt the exact same way that you did, Jared. I was the same kid. Except the difference back then was, like, I would go to school and tell my buddies about it in a rural community. And like, my buddies also went out for opening day.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you deer hunt too? It's like, oh yeah, my family's got a deer camp over here. My family's got one over here. And then you get older, and then you've got this support group that you're also running around with and you're learning things with. And that seems to kind of diminish now with the way technology is. It's like, kids are in the phone. And when the boys go to school, nobody else hunts.
Yeah.
Like, they go to a big school. There's like one other kid in Miles's class that hunts that I'm aware of. The rest of them don't. And some of them fish, but
Yeah.
he's playing that Hunter Call of the Wild game the other day on the TV. And I was asking him, like, does any of your buddies play this game? He's like, no, everybody plays Call of Duty and Fortnite. And like, if he's gonna play a video game, I want him to be playing the hunting game, right? That's what I want him. I don't want him to be on some of these other ones.
Sure.
But I just think of how different that dynamic is.
That's a weird
versus
culture.
The one that I grew up in.
I mean, we got first day, and I think kids still do. We get the first day of rifle off, deer season rifle in Pennsylvania. It's changed now. It's on Saturday, but we still get Monday off. Most schools do. Yeah, for now. But I mean, that was the thing. And again, that deer camp mindset, that barrier of, like, you had to be 12 in PA to hunt, was like the anticipation. Like you said, that 10 and 11 was like, man, you were drooling to be involved, to just be part of the group. And transparently, Harlan, my youngest, killed his first doe at he was about to turn five.
Well, and dude, obviously I don't even have to say it, but, like, there's nothing wrong. It's not like I'm saying there's something wrong with what you're doing with your kid. Like,
no.
I don't know what to do. I have
we're
looking at what the three of us did, and we're like, well, that worked. We all love hunting.
Yeah, I have the fear of how do I keep him engaged, and he's different. But his brother, who's 11, has killed a couple bucks, and by the time he was 11, I didn't kill him. I killed my first deer when I was 12. He doesn't have near as much interest in it, and it's like, shit, did I make it too easy? Or maybe he just doesn't want to, he likes to go out every once in a while, but not all the time.
Dude, there's seasons of life, dude. Like, if I look back,
it ebbs and flows. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, if I look back honestly at because what hooked me was my spotlighting with my uncle, right?
Yeah.
I was like, here's somebody I really respect and look up to, and there's a super cool thing that we can sneak, and I think this is awesome. That's what hooked me. But then there was, like, years through, middle school and high school where I'm like, I hunted, and I always kind of have. But like, there certainly were probably other priorities at other point in time. It took me a while to come back around to, like, once,
sure,
I was kind of done with sports and I was kind of out of school, and I was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it probably was like getting into that college age. And I hunted, like, don't hear me wrong. I trapped and I hunted through high school and stuff, but, like, I got obsessed, like, in that end of high school going into college years, where I was like, I have a little bit of ability to do this on my own. I got a driver's license. I've got
freedom.
And there was no looking back, you know. Everything I've done since then is to get more access and kill bigger and more deer, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the stages of a hunter.
Yeah.
You know, they say once you get beyond that next stage is you become a sportsman and you start, you know, you reach a certain age where a lot of folks are they're not focused on killing so much anymore as they are just taking kids or getting involved in conservation or advocacy or
100%.
you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think we're all three in that same boat right now where we're still young enough and we're trying to go, you know, and get to as many states as we can and just get as much experiences as we can while we can.
You know,
I don't really think there's anything wrong with any of them.
No.
To be honest,
you know,
I think it's just a natural progression.
You know what's interesting, Aaron, is technology almost seems to have reversed the roles in some senses. So like the same uncle that I'm talking about was, you know, brought me up in hunting and was influential and stuff. It's like now that I'm the one doing the work on the farm and that I'm the one running the cameras, I'm the one hanging the stands and stuff. It's like he's looking to me and my dad is looking to me of like, hey, put me on these big deer. And it's a really weird dynamic shift, you know, and it's almost like it's a blessing and a curse. That information, that technology is like, that's what kills deer ultimately. And it's hard to like, you know, be the disseminator of information. It's like, you know, I decide who kills deer and who doesn't. I don't envy people in that position.
I think that level thing, because of the gear, right, that we're talking about, what's weird is we all just kind of talked about that level that we went through to where we are even today. If somebody comes into hunting today because of the tools that they have and the gear that they have, I feel I've seen it already. There's people skipping 4 levels to go right to here. They're like, yep, I'm going after, you know, giant mature bucks in Iowa. And it's like, how many bucks you've killed? None. But like, that's what I'm, you know, that's my mind. And it's like, well, dude, like, you know, don't be afraid to like climb the ladder, like to get your feet wet and stuff. And it's just, I think a lot of that, and we talked about it, it's social pressure, right? It's the peer pressure of like, if I'm 35 and getting into this and I go out and shoot a 1-year-old 6-point, I can't put that on social. Like people are going to be like, what the hell? Like, oh, that's nice Bambi, dude. You know, it's just, that is something that none of us dealt with growing up. Yeah. Right. And so all of a sudden that comes into play. And I think people are skipping steps, and I think that's leading to the retention falling off.
Check this out, dude.
Agree.
Here's like kind of a counter or like a here's why. It's like, I mean, dude, if you're going out and sitting over a corn pile from 100 yards away with a rifle, you should be shooting a big buck. Like how you better be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you sure as hell have a better.
It's not me saying you better be. It's just like
you have a better opportunity to actually accomplish it. Yeah.
Sure. I worry about that stuff too, because we kind of shield the boys away from that, but I know they're going to encounter it.
Absolutely.
Like they're going to have to deal with it at some point. So it's like, how do you introduce them to that? You know, in that conversation you had with Matt is very much against the social media side of things, obviously. And that's okay. But the way that I look at it is, man, I mean, you're going up against an immovable object here.
Absolutely.
Like social media is global communication now. Yep. It is here, whether we like it or not. And we need to be present on that platform to have a voice. If we're not, then like I used that example a while ago of the different, you know, parents that come up to us and thank us for putting videos out because the choices for their kids are worse.
Yep.
It's like, yes, at the end of the day, would I rather there be no social media so they could just focus on going hunting and fishing and, you know, playing outside? Yeah, that would be great.
But it's not reality.
They don't. That's not reality. So how do you combat that? That's why we do what we do, is to give them an alternative. It's like I said with the video game option a while ago, I want to throw that Xbox in a lake. I mean,
sure,
I don't like that thing at all. But if he's going to be on it, I'd rather him be playing a game about hunting or fishing that at least has his mind turning in that direction to get outside.
Agree.
Rather than playing Call of Duty or whatever it is. I mean, you're giving a little bit to keep their attention on it.
You got to adapt,
because
man.
No matter what you do, times are going to change. And this stuff is here to stay. We have to find a way to exist with it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's where the adaptation comes in on the social side. And, I think that you just have to understand, and this has been, I think, a tough thing for most people, like especially a guy from Pennsylvania, is like all of a sudden I'm seeing all these big bucks from Kansas and Iowa and Illinois, and I have to realize like that's not where I'm at. Like,
I mean, I looked at just the number of people that live in PA in Michigan versus the number of people, not hunters, just people that live in Iowa or Kansas. It's like ridiculous. I mean, it's 10, 20 times the number.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're naturally going to have more people there. And like we said, if you want big bucks, you have to remove people.
Yep. Correct.
You have to remove opportunity.
It's the expectation of your situation is what it comes down to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the expectation is right. Like you can still kill bucks in those areas of Michigan and PA.
Sure.
It's just way, way harder. And
Absolutely.
you got to try way, way harder. You got to spend more time and you've got to be much more competitive because you've got to share the woods with so many more people. But, you look at Kansas and the amount of public land they have versus PA and the amount of public land they have.
Yep.
It's night and day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's good and bad things to both places. I really love PA and Michigan for that deer camp tradition that they have.
Agree.
But on the flip side, it is nice to go to a Kansas and, be able to see huge bucks rutting out in the open in the middle of November.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard part of this conversation is like, if we funnel back to like, well, these places are getting saturated or, Kansas I used to draw every year in Kansas. Now it's every other year, whatever it is. The fact is we're still, the three of us are all still encouraging people to get out there and experience something else. Like if you've only ever hunted Michigan or Pennsylvania, put in for Kansas. Every other year, you could go out there, go experience Kansas because it'll blow your mind.
Sure, or don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, or don't.
Well, that's the other aspect to it, though, too. Like you said, if you're hunting primarily public land, and you put enough people on the landscape that it hurts the resource and the experience degrades, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if that continues to happen, we don't have a resource to hunt. The state can't sell licenses because the experience is so poor for everybody.
Yep.
And then people drop out. And then it ebbs and flows back the other way. Like that's what we've seen in some states is like if you go to one state that's really, really popular at the time, like we haven't hunted Illinois, but I know Illinois is a popular one.
Yeah. Over the counter too.
Yeah. Yeah. We've never hunted deer there, but hope to at some point, but just haven't got around to it. Anyway, that's a popular state. If you put enough people and you restrict access enough for people and they all go into one place and the experience starts to degrade, the people will drop out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
and then the experience will go back the other way.
Yeah.
So the states have to manage that balance. It does not serve them or the hunters for them to pump so many hunters into a piece of public land that it totally destroys the resource. I mean, I know there's people that get flustered about that. Like in Matt's case, he doesn't like that at all. But it doesn't serve the state to do that.
Well, that's why the the western states, Iowa, Kansas as well, like that's why they all have draws, right? There is a cap. Yeah. There's a cap of non-residents coming in. And I agree, and I think maybe Matt said it. The priority should go to the residents of that state. Right? Whoever the resident of that state is, they should absolutely have the best opportunity, the best access, whatever. Like they should have the preference to do it. But these states that are having lottery draws and applications, they're putting a threshold to try to minimize oversaturation of access to some of these places. Now, things like Illinois, Missouri over the counter, Ohio over the counter, they could easily see that resource get way too hammered because they're over the counter, until they put some sort of threshold in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's lower hanging fruit than like just the number of hunters. Like, in Ohio, I think it's the baiting thing.
Sure.
It's like
in Kansas it is too, probably, ultimately.
Yeah, maybe. And every state's going to be different based on the habitat that's there, the hunter numbers and stuff. But it's like, I'd hate to, start cutting people off from being able to hunt there when there's other things that I think could be done away with that would improve the experience for everybody.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, if that doesn't, remedy it, then yeah, you
it's
have
a
to
baby
restrict
step
the number.
versus a big jump to let's stop X amount of people from coming in.
Right.
Yeah, the Western dynamic compared to ours out east is an interesting one because in some ways it's similar and in some ways it's different. You have a limited number of elk in these mountain ranges.
Right.
For the amount of people that want to hunt them.
Yep.
And they live in very specific areas. Now, consequently, a lot of those areas are public land.
Yeah.
So it's when people do have tags, they have opportunities to hunt them. So they have to manage, they've got to cap that because they don't have an unlimited resource. It's actually a pretty small resource they're dealing with, especially with elk and mule deer.
Yep.
Yeah.
But on whitetails out east, we have a fairly large resource across the board. Like there's a lot of deer, even in these states with a lot of people and a lot of hunters, there is a lot of deer.
Mm-hmm.
There may not be a lot of trophy deer, but there's a lot of deer.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a high supply of them. And PA is different than some because you guys have a decent amount of public land, but the majority of the states, they're 90% private.
Yeah, it's lacking
out east.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when that access goes away, and people have only the 10%, or they only have the option like what you guys are talking about, and I see no problem with working hard to lease or buy ground to hunt. Like I said earlier, long term that may be a benefit for wildlife because those people care about wildlife and they're not going to bulldoze everything.
Sure.
So that's a good thing.
Sure.
But you go back to that expectation hierarchy. The people that are going to work hard enough to do that are at the top of that expectation hierarchy. So what do you do with everybody else that's down below that?
Golf.
That just wants to get out a weekend a year to shoot a deer,
Sorry,
Yeah.
joking.
They're out.
It's like
Yeah.
all they have is that 10%.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I see. Like you said earlier, Jeremy, it's a problem that's been it's been in the oven cooking for 20 years and it's been getting worse.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened and then now a spotlight is on. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with. And now it's dropping back off again. Like I said about Georgia earlier, Georgia lost 20-30% of its turkey hunters in 22 versus what their 5-year average was before that. Their numbers just dropped off a cliff. But a lot of states are coming back to the mean now after that COVID peak. But that COVID peak should teach us something. It's like this is an issue that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And habitat and access are the two biggest ones.
Yeah. Which basically tells us, we're not ready to take a mass, consumption of new hunters. We don't know what we could do with them. I mean, the fact that it jumped up like that and listen to all the experiences we're talking about, right? And now we're back down because we couldn't hold them. It was probably
they have to have a place to go.
They got to have a place to go.
If they don't have a place to go, they're not going to keep going.
So you almost have to cater a little bit here to the retention of your existing community. You got to take care of your existing community while expanding the opportunities of resource access, habitat to be able to recruit.
Yeah, and like Jared's saying on the gear point, like if you restrict some of those things and make it a little bit more difficult, I really don't think this gets back to just my opinion, of course. So you take this and throw it wherever. I mean, but I don't think that, making it more difficult for people will keep them out. Like it didn't keep us out when we were kids.
Oh, dude, it lit a fire in us,
doing.
Man. I mean, that thing, the more you failed, the more you just wanted it. I mean, that's how we were brought up.
Yeah, I mean, I get it to a certain degree. Like, I'm not going to drag the boys out there when it's a blizzard and make them sit in a tree for 8 hours.
Here's
straight.
a sterno can.
Hey, if we're hooked enough, we'll do it on our own.
Too.
I sat through many a blizzard and I was like, this is awesome.
Well, but here's the fine line is I would rather take my kids out afield and, miss opportunities on deer or turkey, hear them but not get on them, just be out there than take them out there and every hunt is run into guys.
Sure.
Right? The experience of grinding and failing versus really never even being in the game because it's just constantly interrupted. That's the point that we keep trying to make to a lot of people on the public land side when they're like, well, I just have to dodge these guys and form a strategy. It's like, I don't want that. I want the challenge of messing up and screwing up on that deer or turkey over and over again. I don't want to have to be run into guy, finally kill that turkey because nobody was out on a Wednesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't mind that challenge personally, but I'm also, I don't want that for the kids.
Exactly.
I don't want to take a kid out there. It's like a safety precaution.
Exactly.
So that is a good thing where they've scheduled some of these youth hunts so that kids can be out there and
low
not
pressure
have the competition.
Yeah, low pressure.
But so that's a pro of the youth hunts. But like we talked about earlier, the mentorship thing is an issue, because if then you make it too easy and you stick them in a box blind over a corn pile with a rifle or whatever, and they shoot the first deer the first buck that walks up there and have to wait 10 minutes.
Yep.
Like they didn't.
Yeah,
I think there's a way
there.
You can still have that youth hunt and that youth opportunity.
Yep.
For the kids to make it a little bit easier, but you take away some of these modern gizmos.
You have to. Yeah.
And there's a balance there that it feels like we could reach, where we could still maintain their interest at that
I think
age.
we would retain so many more hunters by just making it a little bit more difficult. Like, I'm not talking about take away a ton of stuff. Just a couple things, tweak a couple things, and sure, maybe the success rate drops, but your retention will increase. And I know that's so hard for certain people to think, the counterintuitiveness there, but the success drops a little bit and your retention will go up because they'll just want it a little more.
Man, we turkey hunted in Mississippi this year with what I believe are some of the very best, hunting fathers, hunting mentors that I've been around, like Josh Thrash and Keith Polk. Those guys have their kids in the woods nonstop. And it was so interesting to watch them take their kids turkey hunting. And we were going during the Mississippi youth season.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's before the regular season. It's before all of us big guys.
That's early March, right?
Early. Yes. So the kids have the advantage of getting out there and not having to deal with the competition. But neither one of those guys made it easy on those kids. Like, I mean, they weren't out there being strict. They wanted them to have a good time. They made sure that it was a fun experience for them. But they were always like, Josh would say, Reed, why don't you come up here and owl hoot? Even though he can do it, he can get the bird to gobble. But he said, Reed, you've been practicing your owl hoot in the shower. Why don't you owl hoot? Reed gets up there and does it once, nothing. He's like, well, Dad, it didn't work. He's like, well, we'll try it again a few minutes later. Now, Josh knows the whole time there's a turkey in a tree 150 yards away. But he's not doing it for him. He's letting the kid get the experience. And then Reed owl hooted in the bird goblin and his eyes got
that's
like
it,
this
man.
big.
Yeah, sucked
it's
in.
Like, that's how and we're hunting on private and public land a little bit with the kids, but just watching those guys and how they've thought about this through, several years of mentoring other people as well, how they've sort of structured that for their kids. And now that's all they want to do. Their kids just want to go with them anytime. And it's the closest thing that I've seen to what our childhoods were like. Like we've all discussed, we've had similar sort of entrances into hunting, and all three of them worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that happening with these kids. It's really cool to watch. So, I mean, anytime we can show that on our channel, I feel good about it. It's to try to set a good example for folks that are mentoring kids. But there was not a lot of fancy gear involved in all that. No. It was basically just turkey calls in a 20 gauge shotgun, with shooting ranges at 40 yards and in. That's another big thing Josh and Keith both did.
Sure.
It's like we had a gobbler at 45 yards and they would not let
him not sign him off on it. Yeah.
He's just a little too far, even though he could have probably killed him.
Yeah.
He definitely could have killed him with TSS and 3-inch shells, whatever. He could have killed him at 60, but he didn't want that. He's like, no, we not quite there. We just don't want to spook him. We'll come back in here and we'll try him another day.
Yeah.
This whole conversation's got me just like reliving like my, just falling in love with hunting, and it's funny to think back. Like I was trying to just think about like the mentorship experiences that I would have had, like, that were meaningful to me. And like, I mean, truthfully, the spotlighting with my uncle stands out to me. And that was early. I mean, that's when I was whatever, 8 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a few times where like I tagged along with him, but like over the course of my stuff, like there was very little like, okay, we're going hunting. Here's how, like I went duck hunting a few times with my dad and stuff, but like pretty early on, like even like some of the first tree stands that my dad and I hung together like when I was 12. It was like, oh, I always like, here, we're going down here.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was kind of from a distance. I think ultimately it was my uncle that I was like looking up to, but he wasn't there most of the time. It was just like, I'd see him at Christmas or stuff, and he'd be like, you know, he would have killed his buck. And I'm like, well, here's these tree stands I'm working on and stuff. And it was just like, I would just watch stuff from a distance, and like, you know, TV maybe had some, you could see some of that was happening, and there's like inspiration from different places, but like, almost seems like it's just in your blood. You know, it's just like I would have found my way to it eventually, you know, whether I had like hands-on mentorship or I didn't. And certainly there was things that happened along the way that maybe kicked me in a different direction or not. Like, you know, I didn't go through a long phase of shooting small deer. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. People should probably do that. But because my uncle was such an established bow hunter, and, you know, I learned from him, like, hey, I'm looking for, you know, he wasn't about age, but I'm looking for big antler deer. It's like, the smallest deer I've ever shot was a 2.5-year-old, you know, whatever, 115-inch deer, and they've only gone up from there, you know, pretty substantially and incrementally.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of rambling on a few points here, but dude, it's just was in my blood. Like,
I mean, I've knocked the milk off a button buck's lip more times than I can count.
Oh yeah.
I laid some streaks down of just mowing, you know. But
and you went all the way through that though. But that's because you came from a deer camp.
I came from a deer camp
where it was brown as down, and I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was like you brought it back. It didn't matter what time of year it was. There was a deer camp, but if before or after you shot one, everybody still came over. It didn't matter if it was a doe or a spike or whatever. Like you were there, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
both worked.
They did. Yeah,
that's
absolutely, man.
Both worked.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
Dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately, that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, there's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com. Check them out. We kind of glazed over it earlier, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but like I think people owe it to themselves to like try to experience and this goes hand in hand with like the expectation, like kind of conversation that we were having there, is like you should try to immerse yourself in as broad of like a deer hunting, the experiences that are available as possible. Like if you want to shoot a giant mature Midwestern deer during the rut, you should try to make that happen, right? That should be one thing that you carve out. Like we go to Kansas, or we just bought this farm in Illinois. But I also really want to experience that camp camaraderie that Pennsylvania offers, right?
We did it last year. And yeah, in the Allegheny National Forest with Steve Shirk and his dad. And hell, the last morning we were like, you know, screw it. We're not even going to hunt. We're just going to eat breakfast and tell stories. And that's all we did for 4 hours. Then I took a 20 gauge and went and missed a bunch of grouse because I didn't feel like going deer hunting, you know? But that was
sounds
camp.
like my childhood.
Yeah, that was deer camp. You know what I mean? And it feels good. There's still man, there's a piece that rekindles there that I think, you know, we have, Warp, to your point, we're way off track at this point from a community side of where most of us in that 25 to 45 age class grew up, what we grew up with deer hunting. We're sitting way over here and the railroad tracks over this way. There's a way to bring that back together and still enjoy chasing mature bucks. Or you do it at your farm.
You can have both is the point that I'm trying to get across. Like I realize that on our home farm, like I have a goal, and it's very, very difficult to maintain and almost impossible without stepping on some guys' toes that I really care about.
Right.
So I've had to like be real about what expectation I should have on that property. But at the same time, I've gone out and made other opportunities elsewhere. And so now I've got an awesome hunting season where from start to finish, I get to experience the best of the best of like all of those different types of environments, you know, whether it's just the camp or it's just, and they overlap.
That's what you want, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's the fulfilling of the bucket.
I think that's the path. That's what I believe is the path forward is we need more people to get engaged with their agencies and their commissions. But if we do it in a sense where we're just coming from these really, strict opinions across the board, then it's just going to be this back and forth battle all the time. It's like, well, this group over here that hates decoys is going, and they're going to demand that we delete or that we eliminate all decoys. And then this group over here is on to something else or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, if we can agree that there's a line that we're crossing on some of this stuff, I think that we all can. I mean, it sure seems like it. And then we can focus on the things where we come together, like on the habitat and access side. Then you can gather people and you can get support and go to these places and make a difference.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take very much. I've seen it happen in these commissions where 2 or 3 people will go there and be vocal and respectful, and they will make a difference. It's just people don't understand how their agencies or even how they work.
Yeah.
They're so removed from that. They just look at their agency and their commission as a lot of times these evil money grabbing politicians or whatever that are keeping everything for themselves. And in some cases they may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not in every case. It's just goes along with the nature of people. Like, you're going to have some good, some bad. Sure. But the point is just to get involved. I've learned so much just in the last couple years about how these states operate. About how, decisions are made and whatnot, and how little people actually know about how their commissioners are elected in whatever state. I'm totally guilty of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm learning more about that now and trying to educate people as much as we can moving forward. I just think that the things that we've discussed here are some of the unity points that we can all find. And move towards that really benefit everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a huge point as kind of a summary here is like there are some unity. There's plenty of stuff that we can all debate on, and it's good. I love the healthy debate on all these other factors, but there's a few points that are undeniable. And frankly, even if you're just an outdoor enthusiast and a non-consumptive user, there are still access and habitat are undeniably needed. And so there's definitely enough of us to get behind this thing and make a difference, whether it's a habitat stamp that's dedicated to habitat or access, or, in the best case scenario, you figure out how to build in this conservation sales tax opportunity. I mean, there's ways to get it done. And I mean, we're the constituents. These guys work for us. It may not seem like it most of the time, but these damn dudes work for us, or ladies work for us at the upper level. So you just have to be heard.
Yeah, you got to get engaged with your meetings, and some of them are really long and boring, but now they've got them in a lot of states where you can watch them online, you can watch them live. There's even a podcast that I was talking about with a previous commissioner from Kentucky recently that they record a podcast after every meeting, and they condense down the main discussion points. So you don't have to watch a 6-hour meeting. You can listen to a 45-minute podcast and figure out what was talked about. And like you may not care about 90% of the things that are in there, but I'm willing to bet every single meeting that happens, there's a couple issues that are brought up that mean something to you. And sometimes we get drug in the weeds on this smaller stuff that doesn't really matter that much. But if we could move the needle that direction, like what you're talking about, Jeremy, that could really make an impact. And it wouldn't take that many people.
I don't think
so. Would
so.
not take that many people at all. If you could even just start at your commission, a lot of these commissions are they're volunteers.
Yeah.
They're folks that volunteer for the commission position. Then they throw their name in the hat. They get selected by the governor and then approved by the senator or whatever.
Yep.
And they're on the commission.
Yep.
Like, you could be on it if within your local hunting community are a sportsman and really support all these things, you could make a significant difference.
I tried. I got denied.
Commissioner Nick? Possibly.
I tried on our fish and boat commission. I made it close, but I'd probably be better on the other side anyway. So,
probably making more noise over here.
Yeah. Well, listen, we appreciate it, man. Thanks for jumping on and talking about, again, kind of, we talked about it with the Matt Ranella thing. Like, some of these are just, it's uncomfortable stuff to talk about and point out, but it's necessary, right? People have to hear this. We have to talk about it. We've got to figure out a movement forward from this, because I think a lot of it is maybe talk behind closed doors, but there's no action being made. And so take it as an initial kick in the ass. Like, this is the stuff that we're all talking about, and obviously they can figure out how to find you or us at some point if they're like, hey, I got a pathway into this. Cool, let us hear it. Like, let's go. Let's figure it out.
Absolutely, dude. Like, I'm not good at 99% of the things out there, but what I can do is communicate with people.
Yep.
Like, that's what the hunting public is about, is communicating to the general public that hunts. So, yeah, if you have stuff going on, you got like a piece of public land they're trying to take away from you, let us know and we'll pour gas on that fire.
There you go.
I mean, that's what we do.
Love it.
That's one of the main reasons why we started this in the first place. So,
yeah. At the end of the day, dude, I mean, Matt included, like in this conversation here, I think we all want the same thing, which is like a quality hunting experience for everyone. Like, who's going to be against that, right? In the hunting community?
Nobody.
So it's just, you know, we have different ideas about what that might look like and how to go about it, certainly.
But the end goal's there. It's the same.
Yep. And I think these conversations are really important for that reason. So, yeah, thank you for coming on, Ward.
Yep. No problem, dudes.
All right,
Appreciate
buddy.
you.
Perfect. And we were kind of talking a little bit there on the sidebar, but we're basically getting the same endpoints across that Matt was trying to do, just in a different tone of voice, in my opinion. Different techniques as well. But, you know, and so obviously you hear from the guy there that I thought two things that were important. Number one is, you know, he kind of broke down his demographic there. They're not recruiting all these new hunters who have never hunted before. Like, that's a misconception there.
Well, intentionally.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, they are recruiting hunters.
Some. Well, but I think a lot of it, to his point, is guys with kids. The kids get into the THP stuff. The guys already hunting, or ladies already hunting. It's just a trickle down. That's fine with me from a recruitment side. I think the misconception is that they're bringing in all these people who never hunted before. I don't think that's necessarily that true. I bet it's a very small portion of their demographic on that side.
I mean, hard to say. Like, it's
Joe Rogan brings in more people than he does.
Yeah, sure. Well, they may or may not be doing it intentionally. Like, but the reality is their content showcases the availability of hunting, and so just by consuming that, people are going to say, "Oh, there's these places I can go and hunt." Yeah, it's not like they're saying, Come on.
Here, come hunt.
Yeah,
do
absolutely.
that. So I think that's one big thing. I think the other piece of it is, you know, when you look at kind of the mission statement of, you know, the hunting public itself, and you kind of get the feel. I mean, if you've watched enough of their stuff, those guys are just really trying to just enjoy hunting again. Like, they, you know, the take the pressure off of trying to kill the biggest buck, and they just want to go out there and have fun as a group of guys. They do these camps, they do these challenges. Like, all of that stuff is super cool. I think that, you know, we didn't ask them, but the one thing that I wonder here as these guys progress is, you know, inevitably they're going to run into more and more people on public that know who they are. I'd be curious to see. I assume half of those reactions are like, oh my God, it's Zach or Aaron or Greg or whoever. The other half being like, son of a bitch. Like, this is what I didn't want, you know? And that's inevitable with the way that it's a shared resource.
I think the interaction with them is almost always going to be positive. I mean, think about, you know, it's just like with a keyboard warrior. Like, it's easy for somebody to get pissed off and go and, you know, bash. But when you see somebody in person, it's like, you know, I don't dislike Warb as a person. You know, I might be frustrated that, like, there's people here, and you know, that comes maybe after the fact.
I think that you addressed it really well on the multiple factor thing, like this COVID, gear, making it easy, opportunity. Like, you can't pin any one of these singular things. Like, even though we gave Chris B a hard time, like, I can't pin Chris B was the reason in 2021. Like, it wasn't, because Warb has confirmed other places. It was COVID. Yeah. But I think that when you look at that kind of side of things, you know, we all kind of circled it, and then we really hit it on the head there, where it's like, there's a few of these like opportunity things that could be taken away that maybe would have some people saying, no, I'm not going to hunt anymore. But I think in the long run, the dedication to hunting, the passion for hunting, and the retention for hunters would blow through the roof. Just making it, to your point, and I know people cringe when you say, I just want to make it a little harder. There's something to that holds tighter for the long haul.
What are they? Go.
No.
Why we talk about a lot of them. I don't know.
Corn Pals is the Corn Pals for sure.
I think baiting is the most. I think it's got to go.
I agree. And I think there's other reasons that it will go. Next 2 to 3 years, it's going.
I think crossbows for able-bodied men.
I think
should be on the docket.
And I think it will be
and women.
It'll be a tough one because in many states that's been put into law as archery equipment.
Sure.
So it'll be a tough one. Agree. Or what I would like to see is separate season. I'm okay if they want to use it, separate season.
Fair.
Give me Kentucky 2, 3, 4 weeks of archery season, like vertical bow season before they come into play. Something like that.
Here's a hard one for you. Not to cut you off. How do we feel about cell cameras? I know how we feel about cell cameras, but in this the context of this conversation,
if bait goes, I'm okay. I think cell cameras kill bucks for sure. I think it is a high rate of killing bucks over bait or minerals or corn or whatever. I think
the two in conjunction.
Yeah, but like our 8 cameras in Illinois, I don't think any one of those is going to kill a buck. It may aid in us getting in the position, but so would a normal trail camera, at that point.
Well, there's definitely an advantage.
Oh, I'm not saying that there's not. I can be here and get the picture, but I'm just saying intel-wise, like besides the frequency I'm getting it and the reaction I can make, they're still capturing the same stuff. I think the ability to use that over a corn pile, knowing that deer is coming in and out of the corn pile,
right,
in tandem is a bad one.
And there are situations like, we talked with, might have been Eldridge actually talking about, in the West, situations where those nomadic herds get extremely condensed over things like a water hole.
Yes.
Okay, I can see why some of those states are doing away with cell cameras, even though they don't have baiting.
I can understand to a point the privacy thing on public land too. I mean, I get it. Or privacy nation. Whatever they want to tell us from a big tech side, but privacy is a big deal. So, I get that to a level as well. So those are the big
3 big items,
the big ones. I'm on the fence because now
what did we say? Crossbows, baiting, and
cell cams
and cell cams. Yeah, I
mean the
two of which we use.
Straight wall cartridge
frankly.
would be the other one. Historically, states like Ohio had been shotgun or muzzleloader only. Same with Illinois. You're introducing now straight wall cartridge, and
again in conjunction. Like I think
in conjunction.
If you did away with corn piles, I'd be more okay.
You quickly can see the one that needs to go.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
which one has the greatest influence?
In fairness, you get rid of corn piles, keep crossbows. You just won't. It won't be nearly as effective as a killing machine.
No doubt. If it's one or the other, it's corn piles for me, for sure.
So I think if somebody said, all right, guys, what's the one thing we're going to remove from deer hunting to make things better? I'd say get rid of corn piles.
Well, didn't hear me out. Like, I want to get this out on the table. Like, I was telling Warb earlier, right before we started, like, dude, I feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world sometimes because...
Oh, I'm bait.
Right. Well, it's because, we'll sit here all 10 podcasts in a row saying, oh, baiting's bad, baiting's this and that. I ethically don't, or morally or ethically, as far as like...
I don't use a crossbow.
yeah, I'm not that bad.
No,
but I don't have an issue with baiting wildlife. I think that's, it is what it is, whatever you want to do. Where I start to feel not right about it is where, like, when it's done so frequently on such a large scale that it's like where I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that's been confirmed. It's like people might still feel like, well, you don't have to. You can hunt the way that you want to. That's bullshit. In Ohio,
it affects me.
Yeah, in the state of Ohio, if you're not baiting, you're missing. You are missing out.
I mean, me from a biologist angle, I know the detriments to baiting. The fact is I could put bait out as long as I want. I kill my deer, I stop baiting. The deer become reliant in that area. And also, the existing habitat around a bait area is freaking mauled. It is destroyed. And so for me, and I think for you and for a lot of people, I put a lot of time and money into habitat projects on my farms that frankly are diluted because of baiting in terms of the hunting season.
Sure.
Now, in the off season, nobody's really feeding that much.
Well,
so
in the same sense, it's frankly, it's
property.
money wasted because, why would you invest thousands of dollars into, X habitat improvements when you could just dump a corn pile?
Good question.
And ultimately, so this is where I wanted to get it on the table. It's not like we don't bait, right?
No,
like,
we do.
In the state of Ohio, I do. Like last year,
I do.
I bought, what did I buy? 5,000 pounds?
7,500?
7,500 for $500 or $600. Like, it's fairly affordable. And it is what it is. Like, it's cool. It's cool. It's like, okay, we get pictures and stuff. But like, ultimately, if I, I see how it manipulates deer movement. I know it's not healthy for them. I know it's not like a true organic hunting experience. And I see how it takes away from, properties that are well managed and stuff and distributes that wealth to small, guys that just come in for 2 days and dump corn piles and kill deer. I just don't think that it's right. I just think that everybody would be better off without it. I'm not trying to like harbor more opportunity for myself, even though selfishly I've put a lot of work into the properties that we hunt.
You would benefit
and I know that they will benefit from that.
Yep.
I'd like to see that across the board as opposed to who can dump the most corn.
I think disease, we beat on it a little bit in the last podcast. Disease will be the one that removes it. And it's happening. It's going to happen faster than people will realize. And frankly, you'll have no say in it. That's just how it's going to be.
Nor will we.
No, nor will we. But it will be going in the direction that we would like to see it go. It's going to be gone.
Sure.
It'll happen.
And I don't want to see
Kansas is going to happen. Kentucky's going to happen. Ohio eventually will happen. I don't know what other states bait. Those are the ones I care about.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to take opportunity away from anybody.
It doesn't.
No,
it doesn't it makes it harder.
Yeah.
Makes it harder. If you have 10 acres, it's going to make it a hell of a lot harder for you to kill a deer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take the opportunity away. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm not going to make it. It's not a chip shot anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's counterintuitive because like what somebody might say, well, I only have this 10 acres to hunt and, so-and-so's got all this land locked down. Listen, those larger landowners who currently this is the state of Ohio again, who currently are feeling like, I don't know, stolen from, for lack of better words, by smalling neighboring piecings, because of the baiting. If that was done away with, that resource would go back to its
normal movement,
to its normal
natural
movement. Those landowners, I'm telling you, are going to be more welcoming of or more willing to share the resource with people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason that it's so...
And that deer's not going to just stay on my property. He's still going to go through your property and the neighbor's property. It's natural movement. It's just he's not going to go to your corn pile and to your corn pile only because that's what you're offering. It's going to make it more difficult. Everybody can understand that, right? But we just got over being a little bit more difficult may not be a bad thing. And if you're going to say that, forget it. If they take away corn piles, I'm not hunting anymore. We don't need you.
Right.
Hit the road. You don't like it.
Well,
you don't love.
Not like a kick in a boot, but fine. Yeah, fine. If that's what you want to do,
I'll boot you. I mean, you can't take it a little bit harder. Like that's just how it's going to be.
Sure.
It's going to be harder for me too because I can't. Even though if I have a bigger property, I can't do it on my property either. Well, nor could this guy.
Well, we want it to be harder for a couple of reasons. Because it's for a couple of reasons. Because it's more rewarding when you do finally capitalize on it. It's more passion inspiring for people who are experiencing it maybe for the first time, and it's benefiting the wildlife because they have opportunity to gain, an age of maturity.
Yeah. I 100% believe that kids, although may not see the same success, will long-term have more dedication to the pursuit of hunting because it's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And that's
I guess
hard
who
for
puts
people.
money into, preserving a wild resource or creating habitat or creating access. It's people, regardless of their success, who are passionate about this sport.
That's who's dumping it in. Yeah.
And that's what you want for the future of hunting.
And that's the neighbor I want. I want to be next to the person who is enhancing their habitat and protecting deer and trying to grow better quality herds overall because my property, as small as it may be, is going to benefit from that. Or the public that I'm against it, I'm going to benefit as a public land hunter. If anything, the public land hunter and the guy who's managing his property are on the same page with this one. We may be very far apart on a lot of things. We're on the same page with this one saying, corn does me no good and does me no good. Get rid of it.
Yep.
It's a small sliver in the middle of small property owners.
Yep. Agreed.
And that's it, Nick.
That's it. That's all she wrote.
Damn it. That's it.
We were trying to, the other day, we were trying to figure out how to make a t-shirt of like a crossbow and a corn pile and like a big X around it.
Yeah.
I have a draft.
You got a draft of it?
I'm working on
I bet
it.
it'll sell. Like,
I'll wear it.
yeah.
Well, hey, if that's why we're doing this podcast, actually, is to sell t-shirts.
Sell merch. We're merching.
That's the main thing.
And Nick's going to be our new merch salesman.
Yeah, I have to fulfill those out of my basement at home.
Really?
Yeah. Y'all been wondering who's been sending this stuff out here. Yeah.
It's a pretty high class operation here. So, anyways, we appreciate you listening to episode 140 with Aaron Warbritton of the Hunting Public. Great to have Warb back on. It's August. You're listening to this in mid-August. Season is coming. You're starting to feel it. Get out there and shoot your bow.
We'll see you later.
Take me